So how did you become a psychiatrist for the CIA?
I got recruited. It was totally unexpected. So in 1998, so I got recruited by them in 2002, but in 1998, 97, 98, I had transitioned from studying stress-related disorders in the lab at Yale to working in a field environment with the special operations community at Fort Bragg. And that introduced me to a whole world of people working in intelligence in the different activities. And so people got to know the kind of stress research I was doing. And they knew something about post-traumatic stress disorder, stress resilience, stress hardiness. Like the quick question is, why do some people get sick if something really bad happens to them in terms of a traumatic event? And why do other people not get sick? Like they bounce back, they move on. And
you mean like a psychological traumatic event?
Yeah, for something that we call post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the truth is most people don't get it when they're exposed to trauma, but we've never understood kind of why were some soldiers who were exposed to trauma in combat, why did they suffer from symptoms after that exposure, whereas others didn't? And in the early 90s, I was part of what was called the National Center for PTSD. Congress created it, I think, in 87, but then reformed it in 89 to study the neurobiology of post-traumatic stress, to say, is it really different from depression, anxiety, panic, and things like that? So the long and short of it is we had discovered a number of neurobiological factors that were different in people who did and did not have PTSD, even though they had the same levels of combat trauma exposure. But since there was no war going on, we were looking at things retrospectively. So we didn't know whether the abnormalities we saw in them had been caused by war, whether they predated it and represented a vulnerability, or whether they were just side effects. So, for example, if you have diabetes, you may have impotence problems or numb feet. Those are side effects of poor sugar control, right? And then the damage it does to neurons, but they're not part of the pathology of diabetes. And so for PTSD, we had the same kind of questions. So I was poking around, and I had been in the Navy, and I phoned somebody, and he connected me to a colonel over at Fort Bragg, and he said, come and give us a lecture on what you're doing. So I came into a lecture, and at the end of the lecture, they said, could you stay for a couple of days? We have something fun to show you. And that's how it was the first time I'd ever seen the survival school, sort of mock POW camp where people were doing code of conduct training.
Is this SEER?
Yeah,
okay.
For the SEER training. And, I was like, this is really cool, but is it really stressful? Because you signed up to go. So the first series of studies I did for like 6 months were collecting spit, blood, psychological testing, and people going through. And the long and short of it was some of the highest stress we've been able to measure in controlled ways in humans, which is really good. So, for example, during the interrogation stress, the levels of cortisol that go up are equal to those that my boss had measured in pilots landing on an aircraft carrier at night for the first time.
Whoa.
So we were able to get to see in a controlled setting, it's like neurohormone responding, to be able to make some inferences about how things might apply in the real world. So that turned into a series of studies, and I began to interact with people who came from different parts of the intelligence community, just because of the venue, because I was working with guys who were over at Delta and people in the special operations community with the Navy. So I started getting to know a bunch of people, and I met people from the CIA, and they said, why don't you come and work for us? And I was like, no, I got a day job. I'm fine. And in 2002, one fellow called me, and he had a unit going that was called VIPMAC, or the VIP Medical Intelligence Analysis Center. And Les called me and said, would you come and work for me? And I thought, now that sounds interesting, because I'm also a forensic psychiatrist. So I'm used to evaluating people and then presenting things in court or testifying. And that job was mainly looking at sort of profiling world leaders and then assessing that and making presentations either for people in Congress or people at the White House who wanted to know about a person. So, for example, if an identified world leader had Parkinson's, right, it would be my job to describe them. Here's what it looks like. Here's why you want to meet with them in the morning. if he's behaving in a strange way, it's not because he doesn't like you. It's because it's part of an illness. So it's everybody thinks it's super sexy, and part of it was, but the core of it was helping people in government understand from a psych perspective or a medical perspective the important people they were going to be meeting. Because different world leaders may have different kinds of problems, right? Some may suffer from anxiety or depression or whatever. And
So like before diplomats would travel across the world to meet people, you would do an evaluation on like recent footage of them or something?
they might give you footage. You might have to do your own research and find out. And so that was always the hardest part in the job, right? What data can you get in order to make a reasonably informed sort of psychiatric or medical opinion? So it was a fun job because that was the challenge. So yeah, the secret part of the job was how we got all that information, but the overt purpose of the job was to actually make our government officials smarter so they'd know how best to interact with the person for that.
What other sorts of reasons would you do this sort of forensic analysis on world leaders? Only for like diplomatic meetings, or were there any other strategic reasons you would be doing this?
You can do them for a number of reasons. When I did them for the Department of Defense, like I used to do some where they'd say, here's a guy, he sent this letter in saying, I have anthrax, this is what I'm going to do. Like, is he crazy? And you get to watch all the videos and kind of go, it does look like a real mental disorder. These are the features, or it looks like this, or it's not consistent with what we know about a mental illness. So it might be related to targeting and profiling. So for people could say, what do you think of this leader of a terrorist group? Why does he behave that way? And, in part, I tend to be on the more conservative side of saying, it's probably normal behavior. Not everything is illness. But every now and then you do see features in behavior where you say, that's kind of beyond the normal range that you see in people. And you give them an opportunity to view the person from a different perspective. I used to do it for law enforcement. Part of the job when police interrogate people, we used to be able to sit behind a one-way mirror, and then they come in and say, what do you think of the guy? And you could say, I think he's depressed. They think he's super spy. I'm like, I think he's kind of dumb, and I think he's depressed. But because, when you're from a medical perspective, we're thinking of the possible medical explanations or psychiatric explanations of something.
Yeah.
When someone's a police officer or an intelligence officer, they're always thinking, you're trying to lie to me.
Paranoid.
You're trying to fool me. So it's a way of pulling back a little bit and saying, how about if you think about him from this perspective? Does it give us any other insight into his behavior and how we might influence it or mitigate it? Yeah.
So this is the kind of stuff you were doing before you got recruited to the CIA?
Yeah, I was doing that for the DoD.
What was the process like being recruited for the CIA? Did you have to go through all the typical tests that the like CIA officers go through?
Yeah, well, so there's different roles. And since I was getting recruited in already as a doc, I had to go through all the screenings and interviews and security evaluations.
Yeah.
And then in my position, I was not joining the clandestine community.
Right.
Because I'm recognizable. I'm already mid-career, so I'm not going to be somebody that nobody knows on the planet. So I didn't do anything like when people say they went to the farm or they learn how to be an undercover or clandestine person. But yeah, I had to go through all the screening and the interviewing. It was kind of fun because I get interviewed by psychs, and of course I use the same testing.
Now, I think you were doing this around the same time. My friend John Kiriakou, who's a former CIA officer who was in Pakistan, he captured Abu Zubaydah, who was Bin Laden's like IT guy. I think there was around the same time he was in, he would have been in Pakistan around the same time. Yeah. And he's described to me that the MO of people that the CIA wants to recruit are people that are on like the borderline of sociopathy, but not quite full sociopaths.
That's one way you could put it, right? If you're trying to, so the business in intelligence is you want information, so you need either placement and access. So if you can't get there, then we want you to find somebody who can and someone who's willing to break the law. A spy is a foreign national who's willing to commit treason in their country to help us.
Right.
So when you say we want somebody who's a bit on the sociopathy end, it's one way to phrase it. I'd say it's a person who's willing to break the law or willing to take a risk to achieve a goal. So for some people, they may be just too high-strung, nervous, and anxious to function well as someone that you've recruited, because they go, I'll do it. But every time you put them under stress, they really actually have a meltdown, because they'll say that they're confident, but they have too much anxiety. You have other people who are slick and cool and on that sociopathy end, you say, I'll do it for you. But they're also making a deal with everybody else, right? So, if they're lying to them, they're probably lying to you as well. So I think in that world, you do see a range from people who they believe they want to do something for the right reason, like to have the U.S. get their family out of a country, or because they believe in the principle, or because they want to make money. I mean, spies get paid, right? So I think I wouldn't disagree with his assessment of it. I would just say there's probably a wider range of people that get recruited. And those are the foreign nationals but if you're a U.S. citizen and you're going into like the line of work I was in, they're already recruiting for me like a doc, and I'm board certified, so I've been doing it for a long time. And
you're not recruiting spies yourself.
No,
you're
we might be asked to evaluate them.
Right.
Say, what kind of a person have I hired? Right.
Right.
So I had colleagues who that was their main line of work, so a case officer could consult with them and say, what can you help me manage this person that I've recruited who says they want to help the U.S.? And so I think of it like working in the Department of Corrections. I did that as a moonlighting job when I was a resident.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where you're practicing psych in a prison setting with people who've been violent. Some people murder people. Some people are sex offenders. You're doing medical work. You're doing psychiatry. You're just doing it in a highly unusual environment. So you have to have training on how not to facilitate someone's escape from the prison, right? Or how not to get used. In the same way, if you go to the CIA as a doctor, you're still practicing what you learned as a doctor, but you may be doing it in just very unusual environments for that. But lots of people had misconceptions about that when I was there. So I used to get a lot of hate mail.
What kind of misconceptions?
Oh, well, lots of people think that you are the spy, like you're the one who's supposed to be going and getting things or exploiting people, and I think that was around the same time when at the agency there was a big debate, because that's when the enhanced interrogation program was going on.
That was John Kiriakou, the thing he blew the whistle on.
And there was a real divide in our community of physicians, like saying, I think it's unethical. You can't be involved in it. Yeah. And there was another group who thought, no, they could. And now, more than 20 years later, we can see that, sort of when you torture people, it ruins our ability to prosecute them. So like the recent ruling in Guantanamo Bay, Judge McCall said you can't use confessions that have been elicited under torture.
Because people will, if you're torturing somebody's child in front of them, they'll say whatever you want them to say, right?
If you think about it, torture as a political tool might be very useful for a dictator, right? You can scare your opposition. You can make people frightened of you. You can probably get some information from people. But as an intelligence gathering technique, once people figure out you're not going to kill them, or that then you have no hand, really.
I was recently sent some gorgeous Amanita muscaria by our sponsor, Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals, the top supplier in the U.S. And I have to say, what it does for my anxiety is incredible. But there's much more than just stress relief. Being non-addictive and interacting with the brain's GABA receptors, this assists with tapering off of benzodiazepines and alcohol. Stress and anxiety make it easy to slip back into addiction. That's why thousands are turning to Amanita muscaria from Minnesota Nice. It's not a magic bullet. Real recovery takes community and support. But this mushroom has been used for centuries to promote relaxation, improve sleep, and even enhance dreams. Their founder, Christian Rasmussen, used Amanita to overcome his own withdrawal and built Minnesota Nice to make natural healing accessible and affordable. Their capsules kick in within an hour and last 6 to 8 hours and cost a fraction of pharmaceuticals. And it's not just Amanita. They've got Blue Lotus gummies. Yes, Blue Lotus in a gummy. Reishi mushrooms for sleep, and more. Plus, they give back, like donating $12,000 to the Fungi Foundation and leading research with brain mechanics. This is the kind of company I like to get behind. Try this incredible blend of ancient and modern technology. And Minnesota Nice wants to help you find harmony with my exclusive offer. Go to mnniceethno.com/DJ and use the code DJ22 for 22% off your first order. That's mnniceethno.com/DJ and use my code DJ22 for 22% off your first order. Yeah, there was a CIA psychologist who lives like an hour from here, who was one of the guys of the architects of that whole program.
Yeah.
I think they made like tens of millions of dollars for that. I forget the guy's name. I want to say Mitchell.
Yeah, Jim Mitchell. Yeah, I knew him. Bruce Jesson and Jim Mitchell.
Yes,
and I knew them both.
Yeah. That's that whole thing was crazy. You know, the enhanced interrogation stuff, and what they did was, I believe they had black sites all over the place, right, where they were doing this stuff. Yeah. But my thing is, like, you know, I imagine torture's got to work to an extent, right? If you don't go too far, like, it's got to be like, how else are you going to get answers from people if they're going to hold back, and you gotta hold their feet to the fire to some degree to get.
That's the really interesting part, though, historically. Like from World War II and on, most seasoned interrogators have said, no, you don't.
Really?
Yeah, that you work with people over time, they get to know them, and people begin to tell you things. I mean, the dilemma, I think, with it in the program as it ran is that people were never able to say, well, what did we learn from torturing anybody? Mm-hmm. I mean, I used to tell people, like Alan Dershowitz had once said, get a torture warrant, right? When people are arguing over, was this a good thing to do or a bad thing to do?
A torture warrant.
Yeah, just get a warrant to torture people. You might as well admit it, because people were kind of going, oh, it's not torture. Well, everybody knows it was now. And he said, look, if that's what we're going to do, get it. And I used to tell my colleagues, I said, well, then show people the data. What did we learn from threatening to kill people, right? Or torturing people.
Right.
And then the public needs to think about that and say, what do you want your government doing? But in the world of intelligence gathering, whether it's Hans Schiff's work, and I'm blanking on the U.S. interrogator who worked in the South Pacific.
Who's Hans Schiff?
He was a German intelligence officer who used to interview POWs and get lots of intelligence from Americans. The other fellow, I'm blanking on his name, but it'll come back. But the work really suggests that when you create a rapport with people, you actually learn more from kind of a softer approach that over time. I think the fantasy that everybody has is that there's a ticking time bomb, that suddenly, like, you must know something that's going to kill a bunch of people in a matter of hours, so we need to do anything we can to get you to tell us, right now. But it doesn't turn out to be true. Most of that information is pretty perishable. Yeah. So that was a disappointing thing.
Well, I would imagine that with all the money that and research that we put into stuff, like when it comes to war, that we would have had I imagine by now we have a much better way with technology and AI to extract information out of people's heads.
Or just getting info.
Trauma.
I mean, remember, well, yeah. I mean, that's what I used to say, sort of trying to get intelligence out of somebody by like waterboarding. They were dragging them around wrapped in plastic with giant ice cubes until they die, which happened.
Right.
It was like, man, that's like banging on the radio with a sledgehammer saying the reception's got to come in better, right? And like in most of my work, me and Gary Hazlett were able to show just raising stress degrades cognitive function really fast and memory, so that you're changing the very organ that you're relying on to provide you the information that you think is going to be helpful. Right. So it never made sense to me. But I mean, if you think back, it was, for intelligence gathering, I mean, Hans Blix, when we were all arguing over, was the WMD in Iraq? And he's like, no, there's not. And then it turns out later, we know that Curveball was busy selling his story to a bunch of people going, this is what Saddam Hussein's doing. But there really wasn't. So I think it's true that if you're systematic with a lot of open source information, and maybe the AI approaches will even be better, you probably can get a pretty good picture of what's going on, rather than saying it's only one single source who knows it. There's probably some unique situations where, a single person might be the holder of knowledge nobody else has. But if that's the case, then they know you're not gonna kill them if you need it, right?
Right.
So it's like the stories you hear now about having to waterboard Khalid Sheikh Mohammed over 100 times, right? So it's it's sort of systematic drowning, and I think once he figured out they weren't going to kill him. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What was the recent story that came out with him? What did they end up doing? They're not going to prosecute him. Is that right?
I don't know yet. I know that he and a few others put in a plea agreement, and then it was on the table. Then I think the Secretary of Defense invalidated it, but then a judge ruled that he couldn't invalidate it.
Oh my God!
So I think we're waiting to see where that's going to settle out. Yeah. But, it's like the fellow that gave him a TBI, the guy who was involved in the coal bombing, he can't go to trial because he's incompetent.
Really?
Yeah. So I think that's the disadvantage of
Federal Appeals Court's thrown out the plea deal that would have allowed Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the alleged mastermind of the 9/11 attacks, to plead guilty in exchange for his life sentence without possibility of parole.
And so they invalidate it. So then it'll go back to the table about whether or not they can have a trial. Like I had to testify down there, last year ago in May. Which is on all the stress research, and that's when the judge was trying to think about what happens under stress, and can you take a confession even if it was given while somebody wasn't torturing the person? And so the whole issue there was you take them back to the same room that they were tortured in.
Oh, wow.
So it was an interesting case to testify in because from a science standpoint, we know this makes sense. We call that contextual conditioning. We can do fear conditioning and make you afraid of this coffee cup, right? Or this stimulus that elicits a fear response. But we know that your brain not only learns that this is bad, that the coffee cup might be bad or dangerous, it also learns, it's this room we're in. And so your brain is doing fear conditioning to the context and to the specific stimulus. And so the argument the government had been making at the time was, well, since we weren't torturing him at the time the guy confessed, it had to be a voluntary confession. And from a science standpoint, it makes no sense. If you've taken somebody back to kind of the similar environment they were in, and they still know these are all people from the government, and you've tortured them, it wouldn't be reasonable to think that they haven't got torture on their mind from a conditioning response level. So the judge said, no, can't use confessions that have been tamed under those contexts. So I'm assuming then that means it will all move back to pushing for a trial. Yeah. But it's amazing, right? This is like 2025.
It's insane.
And people were wrapped up in 2003. So, and we still have no trials.
Have you ever visited Gitmo?
I have. I've been down there twice. Yeah.
Interviewing people?
No, I was down there to see some of the sites, and then I was down there to testify.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was intense. It's, the place is like a giant prison. I saw the inside. So I lived in a courtroom that felt like living in a refrigerator all week. Yeah, it's really tightly controlled. So you fly in, they put you somewhere to stay, and then you go. There's just like fences, barbed wire. It's like a giant prison. The most liberal place you can go to is one of the 3 restaurants or the gym.
Oh, wow.
Then you have the most freedom to go anywhere. So I can see why nobody may really enjoy being stationed there.
Right.
But it's a strange. I found it a very strange experience. Yeah.
So when you were working for the agency, what were some of like the most common cases you were working on with people, whether it be case officers or whether it be like recruited agents? What were some of the common like issues, psychological issues, or? Well,
in those first years when I was in that particular unit, it was mainly people of interest related to higher levels of government.
Right.
And then I moved to the sort of what people call the Q branch, or the Directorate of Science and Technology, and mainly worked in the Office of the Chief Scientist on our detecting deception program. And so most of my
detecting deception program?
Yeah. So most of my work in the last 5 years I was there was really looking at this question of how accurate are any of these methodologies that purport to be successful at detecting deception? And how do we know they work? And at the time, the more I investigated it with my team, and we set up different labs, and I was in charge of reviewing the protocols that the government would fund to say, show us if this technology works, right? And so my job was to go to the sites, because I've done a lot of human studies, and we'd be able to see, is the study valid? Does the tech work? And things like that. And the long and short of it was, most of what was being advertised doesn't really work that well at all. Whether it's a voice stress analyzer or a traditional version of the polygraph or brain scans, where everybody wants your tax dollars, right? They want the government to buy their products to go and use
Contractors.
Yeah. So I don't know if you heard of the PCAS, that portable credibility assessment. It's supposed to be a handheld little polygraph. They cost a lot, and they never
like
worked.
an e-meter type thing.
It almost looks like
Scientology.
It almost looks like an e-meter.
Okay.
Yeah, it has a red light, a green light, and a yellow light, and it was supposed to sort of streamline this idea, but it's linked to the same idea as the polygraph, right? That lying makes you alarmed, and that by using any technology that sees an activation of your fear and alarm system, that must mean you're lying. And I'm like, well, I think the premise is flawed, because if you're in a war zone and you want to come and tell the U.S. something, and you know the other people will kill you if you're telling us something, you're going to be more nervous than the person who goes, I think I'll go tell them a story, see if they give me some money. Mm-hmm. So the lies in the intelligence world are more along the lines of lies of fabrication. Like, I know something you should know, so pay me and I'll tell you, which is different than the common lies that police run into, which is, I don't know, I wasn't there and I didn't do it. Right? When they go, were you involved in a crime? They go, no. So we call that a lie of omission. And most of the studies that existed at the time, everything was centered around that law enforcement model of police interviewing somebody and saying, you did it. And
right.
No, I didn't do it. And the thinking around that.
It's like more of an offensive versus defensive lie.
Yeah. And it was like, the guy who created the polygraph, right? You think about that and think about Wonder Woman. He created Wonder Woman as well, right? So that's why her lasso, she could wrap it around people and make them tell the truth. That was the fantasy, or like truth serum. But the hypothesis was that lying is a threat. And so when you go to lie, it activates your sympathetic nervous system, because you're trying to survive the threat. And that if we detect activations of that part of your brain or your body, that's why it measures your blood pressure, your heart rate, your skin conductance, that those will tell us that you're lying. In fact, it's not
proxies, measuring proxies.
They're proxies for it, and it's not really that great. Mm-hmm. I mean, the meta-analyses in looking at the accuracy of the polygraph suggest maybe comes in around 52 to 56%. You could flip a coin. Under certain circumstances, there is a form of the polygraph testing called guilty knowledge testing, where you can get it up to about 70, 75%. But it's a recognition thing. So, for example, if I have you look at a card, I say, here we've got 7 playing cards or 7 numbers. You look at one, shuffle them up, and then I just hold it up, and you just say no. And I go, was it this number? Was it this number? Was it this number? You could say yes or no. When you see the number you saw before, you'll have a recognition waveform in your head. You get a P300, an orienting sort of response to it, and that'll change your skin conductance. And so, but you could say yes to them all too. So it's not really a lie test. It's a test of recognition.
Sure.
But that's not the test that people use when they're interviewing people in the field and saying, have you ever lied? Have you ever done this? Is today Tuesday? Are you sitting down? So part of my program was looking at those different kinds of polygraph testing, and then looking at new technology. Some people wanted us to fund brain imaging stuff to go to Afghanistan. I was like, who's going to put their head in a magnet and lay still? So, it's really true. If you have a compliant participant who goes, I promise not to hum, wiggle, do anything, but just think about what you tell me to think about, or push the little buttons when you tell me.
Right.
You can see some really nice differences in brain scanning between when someone is saying no, that they don't know something or don't recognize something, or endorsing a story that's a lie versus a story that's the truth. But a friend of mine did a study Jerry Ganis up at Harvard, and he found that if you just think about wiggling your little finger, you don't when you're in the scanner, but just think about it. It made the differences go away. So
it made the differences go?
It made the differences in brain activity that were seen between when you were lying or truth-telling. You could obliterate those differences by just imagining you were wiggling your little finger.
Oh, wow.
So this dream that, we could take you, force you to put your head in an fMRI or something and say, tell us the truth. And you go, no. And it would, it was sort of a fantasy. Most people didn't understand that. And so my job, I got to be known as Dr. No.
Dr. No.
Because I would look at proposals and I would say, no.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but your decisions on Prize Picks can get you paid. Don't miss the excitement this season where it's good to be right. I've used other apps before, but with Prize Picks, I can actually understand why people like this app. It's clean, it's fast, and it's simple. You just pick more or less on your projections, throw a couple of your favorites into a lineup, and you're good to go. That's it. It's daily fantasy without the clutter. This week, I'm looking at Saquon Barkley. Can he punch in more than one rushing touchdown? Joe Burrow, can he sling more than 2.5 touchdowns? Or Josh Allen, over 270 passing yards? You scroll through, you make your lineup in less than a minute, and suddenly Sunday feels twice as exciting. And one of my favorite parts is if one of your guys goes down early and doesn't come back, you're not automatically sunk. You've got an injury reboot. Plus, all the deposits and withdrawals are smooth. Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, whatever works for you. No waiting to play or wondering where your money went. So if you're like me and you live for those what if I'm right moments on a football game, then Prize Picks is the way to go. Download the app and use my code DANNY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code DANNY to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. How many proposals did you look at? How much? Was there a lot of spooky technology that they tried to test out?
People want the government's money, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we looked at hundreds.
Allegedly.
Yes. Looked at tons of proposals. And most of the time we had to think about, look, our budget wasn't, unlimited.
And you're talking about budget, you're talking about CIA budget specifically?
Yeah.
Okay.
In science and tech, I had, with my boss, we had a particular budget that could be devoted to it. So we would say, how do we want to spend taxpayer money on seeing what would be really useful, what would be relevant for that? So that was a lot of fun because that part of my job was delightful. I got to meet lots of scientists, listen to their ideas, help them figure out will it work, won't it work, look at the results and say, looks interesting, probably won't help people in the real world for that. But there were a couple of technologies that turned out to work that were really useful. And we published on those since 2000, I think the first one was in 2006, 2007, 2008.
Yeah, I saw that you've published like over 100 peer-reviewed papers on this stuff.
Yeah, that's how I've spent my youth. I've designed all my studies on a bar napkin, while drinking and talking to colleagues.
Wow.
It's when you get most playful and you can design things. But no, I've been fortunate. I never thought I would be publishing on detecting deception, though, because my thing was stress, PTSD.
Right.
But when I was there, it turned out, I thought, well, this is how I can be the most useful, even if you can tell people what doesn't work.
Yes.
It's helpful, right?
Right.
Totally. I remember sitting in one meeting. I forgot where it was. We were over at the National Science Foundation. But I remember somebody presented on some data that was basically showing that their toy worked 33% of the time. And I remember looking at the guy next to me and like, flip a penny, you'll at least get to 50. and I remember I had 2 special agents sitting in the row who went, no, doc, but 33% is better than nothing.
Right.
And I'm like, no, it's not better than nothing. A penny is better than nothing. Just flip it. So people they really have a misconception about chance, human judgment.
I've heard statistics like about the old Stargate program that they used to do, the old Cold War remote viewing type stuff.
Yeah.
Where I think I could be wrong, but if I read it correctly, if I remember correctly, it was like less than 10% or something accuracy, but they still dumped millions of dollars into it.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it's ever been proven.
No, but it's entirely compelling at a personal level because you remember the times you got a hit.
Right.
It's like gambling.
Right.
You don't remember all the times you lost, but if you win once, you go, well, that paid off. That was really good. So we have a tendency to disregard when something didn't work, and we remember when it did. So if somebody uses, whether it's a voice stress analyzer or a polygraph or something, they go, well, I know it works because that one time we caught a guy. I go, yeah, but you don't know how many times you missed like the 10 that got away. So to calculate accuracy, I have to know the true positive rate, how many hits we really got, and I need to know the true negative and the false negative rate of something. I need to know how many people I cleared that were truly innocent and that I wasn't just clearing people who got away with their lies.
Yeah.
So what happens in real life is practitioners, whether they're an investigator or something, they don't know who lied and fooled them and got away because they cleared them. They went, well, I believe him, so he's good. Right?
Sure.
So all they're left with in their mind are the people who finally confessed and looked like the confession matched what happened. And so it can reinforce this belief. And before it sounds too disparaging of those guys, we'll pick on doctors. Doctors do the same thing. That's just why now we have to do double-blind studies for medication. Because every doctor could say, well, I gave that pill to my patient and they got better. Right?
Well, and then same thing with surgeries too. Like lots of doctors, they do surgeries, and the surgeries that are, I'm sure there's a vast majority of them where they never hear from that patient ever again. So they don't know if it went right or if it went wrong, and if they found another surgeon.
Correct.
You know?
Right. So that's that selection bias of information that happens. And so from a personal level, you can come away intensely convinced something really works. It's just that we're not aware of all the times it didn't, which if we knew that, it would correct our view. But so I always tell people, you remember every time you hear the report of an airplane crash, but your watch doesn't beep every second a plane lands safely somewhere on the planet, right? Because it would drive you nuts. But you go, yeah, but that one time. Right? Yep. So that's how our brains are wired. We give disproportionate emphasis on something that is meaningful to us, and we place a different value on it, and that's true in the detecting deception stuff. I thought the funny part in that whole world is we as human beings, we always believe we're better at detecting deception than we are, and when someone's lying, they always believe that you can see more of their lie than you really can. So there's that illusion of transparency and that illusion of omniscience, right? And so you got two people being interviewed. The interviewer who's like, I think I can detect deception. And you got the guilty person going, I think they see more of my lie. And both are wrong. So,
At what point are we just going to have some sort of technology that we can just like put a helmet on somebody's head and figure out if they're true, if they're telling the truth, or if they're lying, or even like just suck the information out, in like some like bit, like in bits, and then like just plug a hard drive into a computer. And
well, I think that's what I was just visiting one of the labs, the BrainWorks lab, folks over at Yale, and they're the folks who were busy trying to take your brain activity and reconstruct what you were dreaming about and what you picture that you saw. And it's pretty amazing so far. Like the categories, if someone's thinking about something with the AI reconstruction of what you're probably thinking about, it's not ready for prime time yet, but it still is really interesting. But they're working on that technology while somebody's actively dreaming. I think the New York Times published an article about it where you could see it almost creates like a video of what seems to be going on versus what the person was really thinking. So I think that's the goal people want to know, right?
Yeah.
The other one is the brain-to-brain communication, where if you can hook two brains up, and so far people are pretty good at Tetris, right? They do Tetris better than chance just sending your thought to the other person. But I think the ultimate goal, if you think about it in that way, is can you have communication? Can you have communication between two brains?
Right.
So if I see something somewhere in the world, can I send it to you without taking a picture of it? Right? And if you think about it, that'd be pretty cool. But if I can link two brains, that was part of that lecture I gave at the War College that freaks some people out. But if you can link two brains,
I was glued to that video when I watched it.
Can you go find out what someone's thinking? Right? Nobody knows. So if you're sharing thoughts, but if you're asleep and we connect our brains, this is a future question in research. Would I be able to tap into that? Like, would I be able to experience what you're dreaming? Right? If I And it's because they're two different questions. One, can you send your thoughts to me? Can I understand them? Two, can I go get them? Is a different issue, right?
I mean, get them without you sending them.
Yeah.
Got it.
Right. Because if you think about if you're linking brains, that's part of that lecture. I was like, think about this is like the interrogator's dream, right? We don't have to torture you. We can just go poke around inside your head.
Yes.
But
they have to be willing participants.
Well, certainly under our constitutional rights, that would be an invasion of your
we can go to another country.
Your fifth, your right to, your Fifth Amendment privilege. So,
Yeah.
But the same would true would be for like brain imaging. But when you think about it from a neuroscience standpoint, that would be the really interesting thing. Can you share thoughts? Can you see what other people are dreaming? Can you reconstruct in a non-invasive way what they're thinking of? For me, I always thought about that because I did a lot of work in eyewitness identification, looking at the integrity of eyewitness memory under stress. And I was thinking, right now you have to describe it to an artist who tries to draw a picture. And was he kind of like this or that? That work that they're doing, trying to see if they can create from your brain's activity kind of what the face was that you saw and looked like. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. I'm not sure that it will be accurate. It may represent something you believe is true, but your memory may be wrong.
Right. And that's something that is definitely true, is that eyewitness testimony degrades quickly over time. Like the accuracy of eyewitness testimony, right? Like
really fast.
What they actually saw gets distorted very quickly.
Oh yeah. And
big time.
I did. That was really fun. We did that in over 800 special operations guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't think I was going to do that either, but because I had a friend, Beth Loftus, who's really famous for her work on false memory and looking at false memories that have been generated in therapy, where people then accuse their parents of abusing them, or aliens in the basement, or babies in blenders. There was that sort of recovered memory syndrome series of cases in the late 70s and in the early 80s.
Oh yeah.
And I never paid any attention to it. I thought, okay, so they meet with a therapist, it creates a false memory, then they sue. But that's like for things that happened when you were 3, 4, 5. And it didn't seem to be too much of a stretch, where I believe that we can manipulate your memory to change what you remember from when you were 5. Versus, can I change your memory for something happened yesterday when you had a big man throwing you against the wall and hitting you and making you stare in the face, or if you were assaulted. So most of the time in like legal settings where someone has an accuser, people are kind of like, yeah, maybe your memory's faulty for what happened 20 years ago. But if a person just got sexually assaulted, we don't think that's happened. We don't think it's possible for that to happen. So if she says that's the guy, that must be the guy. And Beth Loftus had been involved in a couple of different cases where people were exonerated because the eyewitness testimony was not true. I testified at The Hague in 1997 because Steve Southwick and I had published a paper on war memories and found that memories about combat trauma change over time. And at the time, this was pretty heretical because when I was in school, we called it trauma memory was like a flashbulb. So it was called flashbulb memory, right? Like it's seared into your brain so you won't forget it, so you can survive the next time. So we had this belief that your memory for a highly stressful event must be better than your memory for what you had breakfast, 3 weeks ago.
Right.
And you go, unless it's the same thing every day, I don't know. Well, it turns out memory for traumatic events changes. So I remember I came home from that experience of testifying, and I said to my boss at the time, it was Dennis Charney, I said, I want to do a study looking at eyewitness memory at SEER School because the stress is good. We can get permission to take a picture of the interrogator right then and there before they started, beating the student, and then do an eyewitness lineup the next day. Right. And so that's what a couple of different papers are on. The first paper was with like 500 guys. And we found that memory for the high stress conditions, so they have different kinds of events, but there are two different kinds of interrogation. One's really physically stressful, and the other one, someone's just talking to you. They're threatening, but they can't lay hands on you. So we published that in the paper and showed that the memory for the high stress encounter, where you've had to stare the interrogator in the eyes, they're closer than I am to you, and they get punished for looking away. So they got to look at you under full lighting. It's not dark. The accuracy is about 33% for a live lineup, when we gave a photo spread array, we got it up to like, I think it was 42 or 43%.
Photos were better.
Yeah, just looking at still photos. And then we had pictures from the scene of the crime, so to speak. And in that first study, we got it just up to 51%. But the long and short of it is that in the other condition where the stress was lower, people are like at 75, 80, 90% accurate. So we had this paradoxical finding that memory was better for the lesser stressful event than the high stress event. And that was really a revelation at the time. So it took us all by surprise.
Wow.
But it was really helpful because it's sort of like if you think of a curve where as stress is going up or stress is going up and you're thinking of the accuracy of memory, as stress increases for a little while, your memory gets better. But finally, as stress gets more and more and more intense, it ends up being disruptive to our memory systems in the brain. And we think that's what's happening. So it's that inverted U. And so we think there might be a sweet spot. But those findings were really important because it said, look, these guys are some of our best for withstanding stress. And the majority of them are wrong about the person that they saw under high stress who was physically assaulting them. And then, and so from that study, we went on to do something in 800 folks where we thought, well, I wonder if we can change their memory like Beth Loftus has been doing in her experiments. So in one, for example, what I did after people had been interrogated, so let's say you were my interrogator, I've met you, I've been there for almost a half an hour, depends on the school, and then they put me back in my cell, then, this guy named Dr. Morgan would come along and, ask them how they were doing, and I'd hand them a piece of paper. And I would just say, I'd hand them a piece of paper that had a photograph of one of my students on it from Yale. And I would just let them hold it. And I would say, so I have a couple of questions about your experience when you were being interrogated. And they go, yeah. And I said, what color was the room? Was there a telephone? Did they give you any food? Did they give you a blanket? Did they hurt you in any way? And they'd go, no. And I never pointed to the picture and said anything. Sometimes people go, I don't think this is my guy. And I would just look at them and go, wow, you are very tired. And I would just take it, leave. So the next day when we got them all out of the compound and we do this lineup, photo spread lineup, of the people we would do that to, 90% of them will pick the picture I showed them rather than their guy that they met.
No way.
So if you don't do it, 50% are wrong anyway. So, if we don't do an intervention, half of them are wrong. Their confidence is 9 out of 10, though, that they're right. So you've got these super confident special operations guys going, that's the dude, right? And you're like, yeah, he wasn't even here. And they go, no, that's the guy. You're like, yeah, he wasn't even here, right?
Wow.
But if the guy that was on the photo that I showed them was there, 90% of them would pick that. And what we think's happening is that under stress, we have disrupted the consolidation of memory so that you can slip things in under that high state of adrenaline because they've been all jacked up from being interrogated. They're now in the room, cortisol's still high. We know that cortisol's good for mobilizing, glucose, shutting down your immune system so you can survive and run or fight.
Yeah.
But it's terribly disruptive to an area of your brain like the hippocampus and stuff like that for integrating context and memory.
Yeah.
And so we think what happens is if you meet with them soon enough and you show them something, you're slipping in information and then they can't figure out where it came from later.
Right.
So it's like a backroom editor. And you go, yeah, that's the guy. And so the next day you don't know. It's a bit of a Trojan horse sort of effect. But yeah, we did a number of techniques that Beth Loftus had used in her studies and found they worked extraordinarily well under stress. And so that went a long way in the legal system as well. It's really helpful. It was really helpful in persuading many different courts to then permit eyewitness expert testimony to help a jury understand two key things. One is that confidence is not related to accuracy. Wish it was, but you can be super confident and wrong. You can be super confident and right.
Sure.
Or you can have no confidence and be right and no confidence and be wrong. Right. So confidence is not a proxy for accuracy. But boy, when you're sitting in the jury and you see good-looking guy who says, I can assure you that's the guy. They go, well, that must be the guy because you look confident. You know, and
That could convince the jury.
we have to educate the jury about that.
Wow.
And then the other thing that juries don't get intuitively is a bit like we were talking about for deception. We all remember the time something bad happened to us, and we've never had an opportunity to check it for inconsistencies. So most people just think my memory for a high-stress event must be more true than my memory for a non-stressful event. But it's never been challenged like it is in the courtroom. And our data say, no, the majority of people, although they believe they're right, they're probably not, right? So the debate right now scientifically is what is reliable from it, like which element. And right now where we are is, at least in the stuff that I've been doing, we know eye color isn't shape of your face, length of hair, but whatever you can see from about 20 feet away seems to be pretty good. We're pretty good about race, body type, how kind of big or what kind of shape the guy was. But anything you could see from like 2 feet in was less than half the time were people correct. And we would joke on our research team, we would say, well, it kind of makes sense, but if I have to wait, I go, looks like a really bad dude. Might be the guy who mugged me. But wait, he had brown eyes. What are your, and I have to wait till you get this color. I go, okay, it's him, right? Then it's too late. So we thought it's probably not adaptive.
Yeah.
So our memory didn't evolve to match what we need in court. Memory is supposed to be useful. It just has to be good enough. So you go, I'm going to avoid it. Looks like a bad thing. So I'm not sticking around. And you don't really lose much by avoiding something that didn't kill you, right?
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. I'm reading this book right now all about memory competitions.
Yeah.
And there's like these worldwide memory challenges or competitions that go on. And there's like,
those are amazing.
There's people that win them. They can memorize a whole deck of cards and put it back together like instantaneously. It's insane.
It's phenomenal.
And there's one guy that was mentioned in the book who was the most studied man in the history of neuroscience.
Yeah.
His name was Henry Molaison.
Yeah.
And basically, he had epilepsy really bad, I think in his 20s. So they did this surgery, this experimental surgery on him. It was like the first time they ever did it, where they went in and messed with his hippocampus or something like this. Are you familiar with this?
I am.
Fascinating story. And he came out with no short-term memory.
Yeah.
They completely destroyed his short-term memory.
Yep.
Which I think challenged their hypothesis that memory was stored throughout the brain, right?
Right.
Or distributed equally.
Correct. It's really, it is challenging. Like there's some data that says certain kinds of memories you can find out where in the brain they're probably stored, but then you have the evidence about things being rather distributed, that you're making memory of many different kinds. So for example, where it linked back to my other work in deception, we were using a kind of interviewing called cognitive interviewing to look at deception, to see if we could tell the difference between true versus false autobiographical accounts. And in that technique, you say, hey, I'm really interested in your memory for what you say happened. Would you be willing to tell me about it? And people go, well, yeah, I want to tell you what happened to me. And so you bracket it. You say, so about how long was the experience we're going to talk about, and how did it begin? How did it end? Okay, focus on that time frame. Just tell me everything you remember. Don't leave anything out. Even if you think it's trivial or inconsistent, if it's in your brain, if it got in there, it's part of your memory, just go ahead and mention it. And then you shut up and you just let them talk. Then you go back and you say, I think I'm getting a really good picture. Humor me. Go back to the beginning, start where you did before, and this time tell me everything that's in your visual memory, everything that you remember like seeing with your eyes. And the next time you go, everything you heard, auditory memory, anything you remember feeling, touching, or tasting in the experience. And people go, oh, yeah, I do remember. There was this weird little noise going on in the other room. I remember wondering if it was a fan from the air conditioning system or something. So it triggers recall of these different things. And then if you say touch, they go, I do remember. It was kind of this rough edge on the side of the table. I just remember wondering why it wasn't sanded or something. They'll make these crazy little comments. And then you do the thing where you say, well, so now start with the last thing that's in your memory. Tell me what's right before that, and walk me backwards through your memory. What's in your memory right before that, right before that. And it jogs additional material. for people. It's kind of like when you lose stuff, you try and retrace your steps in the day.
Yeah.
Or if you're sitting at dinner and you're talking and somebody loses track, and you go, wait, what was I talking about? And what does everybody do? They go, oh, well, we were talking about this. We were talking about this. And somebody you go, yes, now I know where I was. And you pick up your story.
Right.
That's because our memory works by association.
Yes.
So I think parts of our memory, it's not all in one spot per se. It's coded in different ways. There's different salients. So that was a memory retrieval technique interview. And the paradox in using it in detecting deception studies is that the technique fails to work in people who are selling you a lie, which is really fun, right? They've memorized a story to tell you, and they want to tell their story and stick to it. So there's no real expansion. You don't learn anything new by going through the memory jogging technique.
Oh, yes. That makes sense.
Yeah, because although it's not true that inconsistencies mean a person's lying, most liars believe that if they're inconsistent, you will know that they're lying.
Right.
So they try and adhere to their story. So we do something really geeky with that. If you take the transcript from the interview, you can create what's called a type token ratio, which is the ratio of new to reused words. So you can say 1 small step for man, 1 giant leap for mankind, just 10 words. But you've used 1 and 4 twice. So you have 8 unique words, 10 total. So 8 to 10 is the type token ratio. Here's the geeky part. Lying changes it. It lowers the unique word count, so it changes the ratio. And we think it's because
lying lowers the unique word count. Okay.
Yeah, it reduces lexical diversity, meaning you're telling your story and you're sticking to it, and there's more mental. We think it's a side effect of the increased mental workload that's required for telling a reasonably complicated lie, because you have to do a couple of things. If I'm just telling you the truth about what I remember, the work in my head is trying to remember stuff to tell you, because I'm being compliant. I'm going, I'll tell you everything.
Right.
If I'm lying, I have to remember what happened, so I don't mention it. I have to remember the story I'm telling you. I have to monitor that I don't let anything unnecessarily leak over.
Yeah.
And I have to pay attention to you to see if you're buying it, to see if I need because I'm trying to sell you something.
You're multitasking.
I'm multitasking in a different way. And that's one model in the world of detecting deception where I found there's this crossover from my work in memory to then the stuff I was doing in detecting deception. And we've now done it in Twitter. I think last year we published a paper on looking at lying in Twitter, and the same thing happened. We had like these teams of eyewitnesses, and the ones that they had a story to tell, their unique word counts. We couldn't go with response length because in Twitter at the time, you were limited to like 120 characters or something like that. But when we did it, the unique word count was different between the groups of liars versus the groups of truth tellers.
Really?
Yeah.
Even with the ability to edit with words and text and all this.
I didn't think it was going to work, but it did.
That's fascinating.
We've done it in Chinese, in Arabic, in Russian, in Vietnamese. We've done about 15 different cultural groups, and so that was really fun. But it was a side effect of the way memory works, right?
Hey guys, if you're not already subscribed, please hammer the subscribe button below and hit the like button on the video. Back to the show. Do you think the idea of or the concept of a photographic memory is a real thing?
In some people, yeah.
Really?
I do. But in other people, no. There's some people who tell you that they don't see pictures in their head. They remember the words about something. So I think for some people, they probably do think in imagery. So but it's probably easier for some people than others. So I think some of the ones are like some of those folks who can do that mind-bending thing of memorizing a deck of cards in 15 seconds.
Yeah. Well, the idea of creating memory palaces is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because that works so well.
Yeah. I can't get it to work that fast. So I use it. I mean, think about it, right? You go, I'm creating this memory palace. And if I've got it, you're chunking all that data really, really fast in 15 seconds or 20 seconds or 30, whatever the fastest guy is. You know, like, that's amazing to me. But I mean, stage mentalists have been doing it for a long time for entertainment. As if you can make an image really fast and pair it with a number, you can say the number of the image, and it'll come back to your brain. But not everybody can do it. The
idea of a memory palace is like you go somewhere like a big building or something like this, right? And then you start from like the driveway, and you'll say, I'm going to associate this memory with the mailbox. Okay, the next memory is going to be with the front door. So you like memorize the front door, and like somehow you connect a word with the location in that building,
or you just imagine it in your mind, that person or the object. So
right.
It may be quicker just to see it visually, and
so it's like a hot dog. You like picture like the Oscar Mayer mobile like floating there right by the front door.
Absolutely,
and it's just something about
the giant hot dog laying in your bathtub.
Yes, right,
bouncing a baby on top of it or something. The more weird it is, or the more sexy or graphic it is,
right. Oh yeah, that's another thing.
It just goes quick, and it seems to enhance the recall.
The more provocative it is, for some reason it sticks to your memory.
Yeah, absolutely.
More. Yeah, something about visualizing this, like that 3D animated image in a certain spot. Like, it's fascinating how that works. So that would be like an example of a photographic memory, something like that.
Somebody using imagery.
Using that tool.
I mean, when you think about it, though, it's probably a sign of health that our memory isn't perfect, right? When you think about it, that's like in my field, like in psych, that's how like therapy may help. Right. So, if you always had to live and relive everything in its vividness and intensity, and it never morphed, it never diminished or changed, then we wouldn't see that reduction in emotional responding to it, because that's a memory too, right?
Yeah.
So the good news is that memory is imperfect, which means that's probably how we move on from stuff. It's probably how we tolerate family reunions. It's how you stay married a long time.
Yep.
You don't go, I remember everything.
Yeah.
Kind of go.
Well, I have this theory about memory that is probably degraded over millennia. Like with the development of technology and the written word and being able to like save stuff, save notes and read and have books and movies and documentaries and all this technology, I feel like taking over for mundane tasks is like, it's got to be like degrading our mental capacities.
Well, did you know? I've noticed it since I've had a phone, about like an iPhone with contactless. I used to know all my friends' numbers by heart. They'd say, who it is, and I can name their number and remember it.
Totally.
I can't do it now. Like
I just committed my wife's phone number to memory like a couple months ago.
Yeah, and I think of it like those. It's like those brain experiments. Like if you're not, or like in sort of physical like muscle training. If you're not using it, you lose it. And I think that's probably what our brains are doing. They're going, I don't need it for that anymore.
Right.
You've got this peripheral brain you walk around with, and
exactly.
So
where does that end up in 50 years? You know?
God, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm probably biased from seeing it in the classroom and trying to teach students. I don't know where it's going to go, but I do know that it's a very different feeling in the classroom, since when people aren't talking to each other, they text. And when I had to say, go find something, even though they're on their phones all the time, they have a harder time doing like the internet searching with critical thinking. Figure out what is it that I need to know. And these are undergrads. In order to answer a question. So some are still really good at it, but I've noticed that certainly when people are playing around on it, just trying to look anything up really quick, it's catering to that feeling of everything. I should be able to find the answer to everything in just a moment.
Yeah.
Or I can ask AI to tell it to me, right?
Right.
So I'll have some students who will write something using AI, but they don't critically assess what it did. And so two things happen in the classroom. I might look at it and go, you never sound like this. This actually sounds way more sophisticated than you ever sound in the classroom. I've never heard you articulate an idea like this. This is amazing, right? So I know that they used it. But if I say, well, what did you think of it? Like, walk me through it. Like, what's the argument? Like, what do you think of the argument? Does it hold? And like, what are the premises? What are the proofs that are supposed to lead me to this conclusion? And they struggle with that, and they struggle with reading in a meaningful way. They can read, but I think of it as functional illiteracy. Like, they know words, but I don't think living in the way that they do on their phone is teaching them the reading and chunking for ideas, like as you're going through an article and going, how is the author lining up their ideas? What are they explaining to me? What am I doing? I'm still thinking it through, but I've talked to a bunch of other professors, and they say, yeah, we seem to notice that there's people can read, but you ask them, so what does it mean?
Like retaining.
Yeah, they can retain what
processing.
It's processing, because like I'm training some students who say they all want to go into national security. They want to be intelligence officers, or they want to do something where and the biggest need still, when I talk to my former colleagues, they had to say, we need people who can do critical thinking, like who can think something through.
Yeah.
And it's really common when I ask a student, so what is the article about? They will be tempted to reread it to me. And I go, nope, already read it. I already know it's in it. Read it a bunch of times. What does it mean?
Yeah.
If it's true, what this article has to say, then what? Like, put it in a bigger context. And so that's what I think is missing right now. And I don't know where it's coming from, but it's a significant shift. And part of their expectation, I think, right now is, well, if I don't know the answer, AI will help me find it really, really quickly. I can just type in, what do we know about X? And I'm not sure this year, I'm going to try something different in some of my classes where they have to critically appraise what AI has generated and write their own version. So they can begin to understand, because it's a tool and it's here, right? So you can't pretend they're not going to use it.
Yeah, I tend to think, I think about that a lot as well. And I think that if you really want to read something and really retain something, you can't just be like peripherally interested in it, or just like, it can't be like an assignment. I felt like out of all the books I've ever read, the ones that I really absorbed the most are the ones I was just enthralled by and I just could not put down.
Yeah.
Like those are the ones I can recall 5-6 years later.
Well, it's funny. I do this course called World of Spies and Espionage, and it's basically books and film, and they have to use those as the sources of information. But there's one film, The Lives of Others, about the Stasi, and it's not in English, so they have to actually watch the subtitles to get the movie. It's their favorite one every semester, and I think it gets at what you're saying. You can't be multitasking, or you're going to miss what happened in the closed caption, right? Unless they speak German, right?
Right.
But they always say, that was really, really good. And it always surprises me, because I think there's a bunch of good movies, but they love that one. And I do too, but I think the difference is it's in a foreign language, and they finally have to focus on it. And
they have to hyper focus on it.
I mean, I was a kid, I grew up without a TV, so I had to hide under the bed at night, really. I did, seriously, with a flashlight and a book. And so I love reading.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little more rare if I ask people to raise their hand in class, like, who's read a book for fun? Anybody read a Man Booker Prize novel? Like, who's just read a novel for fun? In a class of 20 people, you might get 2 who raise their hand. And I think that's meaningful, because I think reading challenges your brain in a different way. It's sort of like listening to a lecture. Some people just like to type everything they say, and I don't think they learn anything.
Yeah.
I think people learn something if they have to take notes. Because if I'm listening to you and I have to take notes, I'm actively engaged with, like, what are you saying? What's an idea? That idea is important. That idea is important. What's the connection between those two ideas? I'm creating a schema, a mental map of where you went in your lecture to me, or what you were trying to explain to me, so that I can go back and look at it and go, these are his key ideas, and this is what he said.
Yes.
When they're just sitting and typing, there's a couple of nice studies on that. They don't seem to retain that.
Right.
Because they're in transcription mode, right?
Yes, exactly.
And the other one is a more active, and I think so.
Because you actually have to think to fill in the gaps.
You do.
You're jotting down key ideas, and then you're going back and processing it.
You're assigning a value to which of these two ideas is the more important one, that one's a subset of, right? Or how are they related to one another? So you're doing a critical appraisal of the information you're getting, learning how to sort its priority and its logic and its relevance. And I think that if they're doing that, they won't have any problem telling me what something means.
Right.
If they're just in the mode of saying, I'm supposed to remember a list, or ask something to summarize the list for me, then it's not really critical thinking. And you need both, right? You need that if you're going to do science. If you're going to do intelligence, you have to be able to do that critical thinking, because there's always going to be an opinion. Everybody always has an opinion about like, what that guy mean, what that guy mean, what that guy mean. What's that imam preaching? What's that pastor saying? What's this political group saying?
Yeah.
What does it mean? Is an integrative critical function task.
Sure. Yes.
So I think I struggle with how to best help students do that, because I think the world's it's just really different. I have to admit, it's foreign to me to think that reading would not be fun.
Yeah.
Right? And I talked to a grad student the other day before graduation. I was over at UNH, where I also teach, and I had a graduate student who came up to me and he said, I had something weird happen the other day and I want to tell you about it. I'm like, what? And he goes, well, he goes, I've read stuff before, but I was reading The Hobbit. He goes, do you know it? And I went, yeah, I know The Hobbit. And he goes, well, I was reading it. And he goes, and there's this really weird thing that happened. I could begin to see and hear like in it. And I didn't hear my girlfriend calling my name when I was reading, which is like totally weird. He goes, I've never had that happen before.
Wow.
He goes, is that normal? I went, welcome to the world of being lost in a book.
Yeah.
Right? He's 25. He's never had this experience before. He thought it was slightly alarming, and he couldn't figure it out. I went, no, that's
what it's like.
That's what being lost in a book is like, right? So it's clearly something new, and I think trying to help them figure out in the new world order how to get that. That's been a
for me, the
challenge.
best way for me to like get lost in a book when I'm actually reading it is I like to put music on and like my headphones. Like I was reading a book probably like a year ago, about it was Annie Jacobson's Nuclear War book, and I was I had the Hans Zimmer Inception soundtrack in my ear, and I was like, I was like watching
Nice.
it was like a movie, reading a movie.
Yeah,
it made it better. But I often wonder whether it's better, and if you can absorb more of the information with listening to a book as you can with actually reading the words.
I think it probably varies.
Yeah.
For me, since I can assimilate things really fast when I'm reading.
Mm-hmm.
I can get more of it done than listening to it. But if you like to listen to a podcast when you're running on the treadmill and you're doing something else, that's cool too, or driving or whatever. So for me, I tend to, but I have friends who say, no, reading is not my strength. I'd rather listen to it and process it that way. Then I used to tell them, figure it out. And that's where one tool that's available online, that Google Notebook, if you give it an article, it turns it into a podcast. Try it. Yeah.
Google Notebook?
Yes. If you give it a PDF, if you upload a PDF, it will rapidly give you a summary of the paper, and it's not just copying everything that's in it. But if you push studio on it, there's a studio function. It may take 2 or 3 minutes, but it will take the article and it pops up as two people talking to each other. Go, hey, so today we're going to cover something really interesting.
What?
And it's amazing, because I gave it a couple of files before I was going to go testify. I gave it one of my forensic before I got on the stand, because I want to know what would it do with this psychiatric report. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing.
That's incredible.
And it really hit key points. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. A jury would understand that. That's really interesting how it made the decision of what to pull from the end of the report and put it right up front. So it moved things around. It didn't just cover the document in the order the document was written.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's not just transcribing it to audio. It's creating two separate voices conversating?
Yes. Yeah. They're talking back and forth. And you'll have to try it. It's a studio function. I'll email you if you can't find it. But yeah, it's Google LM. And I told my students, I said, look, here's where I would recommend you use this. If you say, I am not a reader and I want to hear about this article and then try and read it. I said, use it, have it generate it, listen to your 20-minute podcast on it to see, you'll get the bird's eye view, really key points. It'll even break it down to, forgot the name of the tab, but it'll give you a grid of core ideas, key ideas that are in this article. So it's really cool. I didn't know anything about it, and I had somebody tell me about it like 2 months ago, and I'm like, this is unbelievable.
See, that's my problem, is time. Like, I don't have time to read every book I want to read and read every article I want to read.
just drag and drop.
Yeah, no. What I've done before is there's this app that I have that I can drop a PDF into. It turns it into just transcribes it into audio.
Yeah.
So like if I'm in the truck or if I'm driving somewhere, I can just hit play and it plays the audio. When I get home, I can just go back to the PDF, figure out where it left off, and continue reading.
Continue reading.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, this is different. This is their conversation about it. Pulling
That's
out, and then they add all that social stuff. They go,
Mm-hmm.
"This is really interesting. Wow, this is amazing. I never thought of that." And he goes, "I didn't either, but hear it, you know." So I think I was impressed because I gave it a couple of science papers I have published in the past because I wanted to see what it would do with them. Would it distort it? What would it do?
Right.
It was
Pretty
great.
accurate?
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what I told my students. I said, all right, I'm happy with how it summarized the science study. And I know that some of the science studies are the hardest for them to jump into and read if they haven't before. So
What's this, Steve?
So this is what he was talking about. This is Google Notebook. I just pulled in his a PDF he sent me, and there's the studio button right here. You can generate
And
it.
if you generate it, you'll hear it. It probably thinks for like a minute or two. Yeah, that's what it says, stick around.
And what is this? What is this stuff on the left? Oh,
It
a
summarizes it.
summary. Okay.
Yeah.
Key topics, a summary. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And then it'll do a study guide over
And
here.
will it save all these breakdowns for you, like in a library, so you can go back to them later?
Yeah. And you can do the mind map of it if you decide you want to see it broken down as a mind map.
Really? Like a wireframe type thing?
Yeah. And you watch. It'll get started on the mind mapping and show you that. And then when it's done with the conversation, it'll probably, for this paper, it'll probably be, I'd say, between 18 and 20 minutes.
How many pages is this paper?
Oh, I'm going to guess and say 7.
Okay.
Probably.
So you could theoretically upload like a 400-page PDF to this and it would still do it?
Yeah, I've actually uploaded I haven't done that, but I've done 200.
Oh,
yeah, because I
wow.
wanted to summarize a book that I have in PDF form.
Holy crap, dude.
So it breaks it out. And then, so yeah, it breaks it all out. So a student should now be able to look at this and go, okay, this is the structure from this author's paper, right? And I told him, I said, let's see if hopefully it didn't bump you out of the studio there for a second. If you go back to your studio thing, see if it's generated the recording for you. Because then it's still coming. So
It's still
it'll
generating
come up. And then when it does, I always save it. But yeah, it's amazing. And I told him, I said, this, I highly approve. I say, this is like a great use of AI. I said, this will help you understand how this author decided maybe what are the core ideas, what's the structure of the thinking, what do they do?
Yes.
So if you want to criticize it, you can go, okay, now I know what you disagree with, what you like, what you have questions about.
Right.
Because you can break it out.
Totally.
Yeah. But that's
beautiful.
was
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I wonder how long it's going to be before we can just like plug in a flash drive into our head and just download an entire book and get all the
It
information.
all depends when you want that portal.
Or just
right?
just take a pill.
You know.
Like you make it a pill to
Yeah.
where you just eat that for that book. Because they have a pill you just eat and it just downloads it all into your head.
Well, there's that was one of the things I had presented on. It's really it's like 8 years ago now. One of the guys at Duke, and then I forgot the name of the team up in Seattle, but the essential experiment was rat sitting in one little cage, rat in another cage. They connect their brains over the internet, and this one has to do all the hard work of figuring out the maze or which buttons to push to get food. This one doesn't have to do a thing, and it finally gets up and it knows which one to push to get the food and everything. So there's a transfer of knowledge from one mammal to the other, and I said, no, that's pretty cool.
How did they do it specifically?
They actually connect the sensory cortex in both of them. So the signals from one animal's sensory cortex, not only motor, but the sensory side, is now feeding its information to the sensory cortex of the other animal. So there are all kinds of experiments where you could have your brain run a robotic arm, right? Or something like that. So you're basically using your the motor part of your cortex to send signals through an electrical system to run a robotic arm. But what was missing was the sensory. Like, can I now send knowledge, not just directed stuff, or can I get knowledge from another animal? And that's been done. I don't know if it's been done in people yet. I haven't done a search to to see, but it'd be really exciting because it could do that.
So they're connected via wires somehow?
Or
it's all over Wi-Fi? Okay.
They embedded electrodes over the sensory cortex for fine resolution. But I think if the technology advances with sort of doing like sort of the near field sort of, it's called a squid mag device, so you can look at brain activity. If you can control that and then trigger and stimulate the areas with real precision, you wouldn't have to put electrodes in.
Okay.
So I just sat in one a month and a half ago and drove a go-kart through a maze just by thinking, and nothing's attached to my head.
What?
Yeah, I got to sit down in the chair, the big Meg things over my head, looks like a giant cone head, and you just sit there and you look at the screen and you just think, you go left, 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 and you know, you're not moving your hands, you don't have to look, you just look straight ahead, and the car begins to turn. It was harder than I thought. It wasn't just like one time you go left, and my car went right into the mountain and crashed. You know?
Oh no!
Yeah, and so you get a bunch of tries, and then you suddenly figure out, oh, when I think like this, it affects. So there's a little bit of a biofeedback loop you're actually engaging in. But I think that's pretty soon what people have and want.
This has got to be the kind of stuff that like DARPA works on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever work with them when you were with Science and Technology Division?
Yeah, I had colleagues. Yeah, I had colleagues who were over there. They always had a bigger budget, so of course.
So they didn't try to work with you guys. They were on their own.
No. Well, it would depend on the project. But I remember at one point when a good friend of mine was working robotics, and another friend was at DARPA working robotics, and my friend said, "You know what? I'm tapping out. They have a better budget, and we're at the same. They're doing a great job. I don't need to spend my money on that." So let them do it, which is nice because sort of as a taxpayer, I think I don't have that. I have some redundancy in the system, but they're at least willing. But yeah, DARPA has they have an extraordinary budget. I don't even know what their budget is, but it's big.
Well, DARPA basically, the way they work is they get funding and they outsource stuff to other companies, right?
Yeah.
And the way I've heard about it, the way they work in the past is they'll actually get multiple contractors to compete on a specific project to see who can do it better.
Yep. That way you get multiple options and you can let it compete. You can say if somebody gets it done faster, maybe they get to the target goal sooner. Maybe they get there with a different technique or a different technology, in which case then scientifically that's a big win, right? Because there's a couple of ways we can achieve this goal. In the long run, is one just cheaper and one's more expensive, or is one better under certain working conditions than another? So I think it's a great design. Yeah, I think it's a great way to do it when you have the budget.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I always wonder, like, DARPA, I think, is supposedly whatever they're working on, you don't really see that stuff in like consumer products or like in the public eye until like 20 years after.
Correct.
They've actually been working on it. Yeah. So like one of the things that I heard is that they've been working on things like Neuralink since the 90s. Brain implants to create super soldiers that can go into combat zones without fatigue, without getting tired. They won't need sleep and won't be able to feel pain, things like this. And then now we hear just over the last few years that, Elon's doing this Neuralinks to, help people with, people that have been paralyzed or that have brain damage or whatever. Yeah. So it just makes me, I'm always racking my mind thinking like, I wonder what DARPA's working on now.
Well, yeah, it's fun if you go to the Spy Museum and you see Charlie, the swimming fish, and look at where lithium batteries came from, from
Charlie, the swimming fish?
Yeah. Yeah. He was a robotic fish for surveillance that could swim through the river and supposed to look like a real fish does.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You go to the Spy Museum, you get to see him.
Oh, wow.
I think he's from the early 60s, but that's where I think lithium batteries were developed at that particular time as well. And then later they became mainstream. But yeah, there's a lot of innovation that happens in those arenas of government. And sometimes you're right, you don't get to know. And sometimes you find out years later, like when you look at the history of cryptology and things, some of the people who've gotten credit for certain kinds of discoveries, now we know, well, some government person who got it.
This is Charlie?
Yeah, there he is. There's Charlie.
Little catfish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see they made little dragonflies that were supposed to be able to buzz around and go eavesdrop on people.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Like all the technology that they were integrating into animals, like birds and insects and things like this, is crazy.
I mean, think about it. If you can, that's one thing I was pointing out to my colleagues. They're like, hey, they said, why are they doing this experiment where like you can control like how a mouse is going through a maze by you thinking, make it go left, go right, or whatever. And I'm like, well, mice can get in buildings. So can cockroaches.
Right.
You know? So
cats.
Yeah. So it's like, if you think about the principle, access and placement, how do you have access to something you need to know? And what are the best ways of getting where? I thought about the one guy who was saying, hey, I know what to do with minefields. I have a bunch of rats. I put them on strings and let them run across the field. If one blows up, it's not a human, right? And have them identify where the landmines are. And people are like, oh, that wouldn't work. And like,
would they be heavy enough?
Well, that was the issue.
Yeah.
But if they could smell it, it wasn't usually scentless explosive, right? That would work. There's somebody else who was developing, I don't know if it came from DARPA or not, on cockroaches, using them for search, things like searching for people under rubble. The idea was,
really?
Could you send tiny animals down to find out, are there humans down there? Could you send insects, things like that? But it's just an extension of saying you can have a mechanical drone, or maybe in the future you'll have animal drones or insect drones, right? Would they get you information of some sort?
Birds aren't real. Have you heard?
I have.
Yeah.
And the part
they
of
charge on the telephone wires.
The part, and the part that I believe is, somebody said to me, goes, you ever notice you never see a baby pigeon? All you see is like fully formed adult pigeons downtown. Like, goes, I never see a baby pigeon. There's a little baby pigeon flying around.
They just hatch full grown?
Yeah, that's what he said. That's my conclusion. They don't exist. Pigeons aren't real.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then, they have been doing that stuff since like early in the Cold War. All the stuff that they were experimenting on, especially during the Cold War, always blows my mind. Yeah. All the crazy experiments that CIA was doing and DARPA was doing. Even like during like the Vietnam War, I think DARPA was like doing. I think they invented the M16 during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Crazy technological achievements are attributed to DARPA. With that, that's what you do when you can give unlimited amounts of money to blue sky research.
Correct. And their job, you say, this might be useful for national security. Like, and what problem can we solve?
Yeah, they were even manipulating the weather. There's this video of Michio Kaku explaining how they were, during the Vietnam War, they were basically creating monsoons in specific parts of Vietnam to wipe out to
try and figure out
the Viet Cong.
How to do it.
Like that's insane that they were doing that back then.
they're messy, right? It's the really interesting problems are often hard to solve. I mean, it's sort of like in the stuff around the stuff that I do about people. I remember that the technicians complaining, like, why don't people sit still? Like, because we were testing every sensor you can imagine. There's thermal sensors, motion sensors, tracking your eyes, your body movement while you're having a conversation to see if any of those signals tell us whether someone's lying or telling the truth.
Yeah.
And the engineers would get so mad, they go, well, they scratched themselves at that particular moment. That created too much noise. They're like, these are people. They don't follow. If they're not going to follow all the rules, if you really want to know if it works in the real world, you have to see what you can get. We just finished a project where we looked at. It was about how well can you tell about a person's personality if you never get to meet them. You can only watch them interact in an hour's worth of video stuff by themselves, with one person, with two people. So we did it. We had 1,200 people online take all the psychological testing. We picked the different types that were of interest. And then we had expert docs rate them. And I also had non-expert students rate them and say, we were looking at the 5-factor personality characteristics and also the dark triad, looking at psychopathy.
Yeah, what are they? Can you explain what those are?
Sure. There's we use the acronym OCEAN. So we have openness. Think of it as the inventor factor. If you like Seinfeld, think Kramer. He's got all kinds of wacky ideas. He's willing to try anything. It could work, might work. But it's being open to new ideas, new ways of doing things. You could be into art or literature or the beauty in nature, but it's having a wide range of interest. I think of it as just real mental curiosity. Like you like to try new food because you think, well, I've never tried it. I would like to sample that, right? And so people who are high in it are tinkering with everything, right? And the people who are really on it are really conservative, which is how you want your dentist or your tax guy, who goes, nope, it's just really a tried and true way of doing this. Don't need to fix it. It's not broken, right? So that's openness. And then you have conscientiousness. That's like the RoboCop factor. How predictable, reliable? Do you show up on time? Do you plan ahead? Do you... are you a little OCD? When it's really high, people are like off the chart of obsessive compulsive stuff. And when you're too low on conscientious, you're like, I might get there. We'll get it, and you show up late and you're not well prepared, or you forget to plan. You go on a trip, you go, never thought I'd need money for gas, right?
Right.
And so in like relationships, it's really fun. There's usually someone who's like doing all the planning, and the other one is providing all the joy and fun to the party, right?
Yes.
So that's what conscientiousness is, that logical predictability, reliability factor. Then we have extroversion, be a talker, or an introvert. You can one way or the other. And the big difference is that, like for extroverts, we like to think out loud. We like a stimulating environment with lots of stuff going on. In other words, the lockdown was hell for the extroverts, where it was heaven for the introverts who are like happy. When people go away, they go, now I can rejuvenate. I don't have to deal with anybody. And this is great, right? So people are on that spectrum. Then we have agreeableness, which is how far we go from being Machiavelli to Mr. Rogers. Right. So are you kind, altruistic, modest, honest, don't believe in using other people for your own means, and tender-minded, excuse me, do the feelings of other people really matter? And so the more that they do, the higher you are on the Mr. Rogers spectrum. And the lower end is Machiavelli goes, no, you use people to get what you want. Don't worry about their feelings, right?
Walter White.
Exactly. And then you have what's called neuroticism, or emotional reactivity. Think George Costanza on Seinfeld, or Jackie Gleason's character. Where people are full of, you see what they feel, they're feeling at the time. They can have thin skin. They erupt very, very easily with anger, irritability. Whereas people who are super low are like the airline pilot who says in a really nice voice, and you feel good, like we've lost our second wing, but we'll be landing shortly. And you go, okay, I feel good, because he sounds so calm, right? So those are the 5. And we were having doctors try and rate those dimensions. We were really interested in the Machiavellian one and the emotional reactivity one. And we found that both in students and in the guys who are trained to do this for the government, they only did better than chance if what they were looking for matched their own lead personality feature. So if you were more like Mr. Rogers, you were really good at finding all the Mr. Rogers. If you were more like Machiavelli, you were good at finding the Machiavellians in the room, but you couldn't find the other ones. You couldn't identify who wasn't, but you could find the ones who were. And the same was true for the emotional reactivity. And the students did the same thing, because we had them do their testing before they did the ratings. And right now we're in the phase where we're having AI run it. So we'll see how well AI does compared to humans at rating personality features in these people. So we'll know the answer next week. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah. But it was a real surprise that the docs weren't much better in more domains. But it does raise an interesting question, given the old job I had, because I used to joke when I was at the agency. I was like, I don't know. There's not much of a science to all this. There's so many things we don't know about it. But I was thinking they would at least be better in more categories than just their own personality category. But we now have plenty of data that suggests that's probably true. So the idea might be, if you have to have somebody rate someone, you might have to have 2 people who have a different personality profile to see what they'll detect. Yeah. So but those are the kinds of problems that are hard. Because lots of people will tell you, oh, we got it down. I can read people really fast, and I know what their features are. And my cynical view is, well, I guess if it's that obvious, you also don't need an expert. I mean, if it's like with lying, most people don't rehearse, and so their lies are stupid. They're just like, you listen to the story and you go, that's just that makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're really detecting is stupidity or failure to think through something.
Right.
You're not really detecting any esoteric signals of deception.
No.
So I'm like, that's the good news. I guess most people don't have that much practice.
Right.
That a few people do and they get away with it. Yeah.
Going back to this brain-to-brain interfacing stuff.
Yeah.
So they did the experiment on the mice. The one mouse was able to work its way through a maze, and
actually, I was looking at toggles, and one's a maze, and then the other experiments were toggles. Like, which toggle do you have to push to get food pellets that it likes versus something it doesn't like?
And what was the purpose of this experiment? How does I assume when you do an experiment like this, there's got to be some ultimate end goal for this, right?
It was designed to test the hypothesis whether or not sensory information, knowledge that you have, can be transferred to another animal.
Got it.
Right? Without them ever having to experience doing the task.
Mm-hmm.
Like, can that knowledge now just reside in their head?
And how could this be applied to
war
or military or
like
CIA?
the old joke in The Matrix, he goes, do you know how to fly it? Not yet. And then you watch her upload it, right? And then she can fly the helicopter.
Right.
I think the motor stuff was all more obvious, trying to help people who are either quadriplegics or have lost a limb work a robotic arm. But if you think about the extension of it, having your brain direct drones from a military standpoint, can you think and react? Probably the new systems react probably faster than the human brain can think. So, but the idea was, can you fly something without ever having to go anywhere, right? Or can you work a robot in an environment that you can't go? So you can sit in a booth and be all wired up and you can be running the thing, right? But in a medical context, those experiments were all about trying to see if you could help people use robotic systems to walk, to reach out and touch things, to be able to have an experience. The transfer of knowledge from one brain to another is related to learning and relearning. So if someone's had a TBI, and the idea, can we help rebuild memory? Can we help rebuild knowledge and information systems so they don't have to go through the whole experience to learn it again? Can that information be given back to someone?
Well, we had these machines. We have these machines now that a surgeon can sit in a room across the world, and people can go into the operating room, and this big machine does the surgery for them.
Yeah.
Where I guess they put gloves on or something. I don't know how exactly it works, but there's
videos
of it that are insane.
You're just hoping the internet doesn't go down.
Try to find a video of that, Steve. Yeah, right. Hope the internet doesn't go down.
Correct. Well, so I don't know if you saw it. I called it the possession experiment, where they had a
yes, from the
they
video.
They were in a coil over someone's head, and it was so the guy who's sitting under the coil can watch a video, and he can control the hand on a joystick of a person in another state who's brain's hooked up too, so that he could go up and he could use that guy's hand to shoot stuff on the video that guy couldn't see. So, and that was the idea of the guy who was doing the study. He said, well, I want something where a guy could put on a helmet and say, I'm not a brain surgeon, but I can put on the helmet and lend you my hands so that you can put it on. And we used to joke and say, that's really cool. That's really cool. As long as the internet stays up. So you're in the middle of surgery, I've got nothing. But
thank God. I mean, well, Elon's got all the Sky. What are those things called? The Skynets.
The Sky. That's right. So
all his internet satellites all over the world now. This is the robotic surgery.
Yeah.
I couldn't find some good videos. So this is from.
There's tons of great videos. You'll find it.
They're usually pretty pictures, but
yeah. Oh yeah. Look at this. So he's in this machine. Oh, good.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah. So they strap into this virtual reality machine with their arms, and their heads are in this thing, and then this giant machine.
Absolutely. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So with the brain-to-brain stuff, you're taking out all the electronics and all the wires and all the Wi-Fi, and you're doing it.
That would be the ultimate goal, right? So the first goal would be directly linking them, having wires and laying a net. It's like a neural net laid the grid that you actually place on the brain. They open them up, lay it over the sensory cortex. But the idea now would be is that you wouldn't. Right?
Could you just put it a hat on, or would it have to be on your actual brain?
Well, before it had to get into your brain, but now it's moving to the point where if you're either wearing a coil over your head that's changing the magnetic field, if you're doing that, you can either both detect activation or activate cells. So the idea would be it should be non-contact. Ideally, it'd be non-contact and non-invasive, right? So it could be wearing a cap, but ultimately it could be like with the squid that I sat in. It's not even touching my head. It was just arced over it. So it felt like it was
squid?
Yeah, it's called a squid meg. I forgot what the acronym is. It looks like a big cone, but it's basically reading my brain signals and translating those into an activity. But that's a function of then, I guess, who funds it. And I'm thinking from a commercial standpoint, it's got to go in the game industry, where people want to play video games and they want to be immersed in them and be able to think of things.
What is this, Steve?
Playing videos with mind control. There you go.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, yes.
So this is the crew that has the cap that you put on. And the team in the BrainWorks lab.
So what does she use, her eyes to like move around, or is she just thinking?
She's thinking.
She's got a cap on right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's detecting sort of activity that's going on, and it can be muscle activity or it can be brain activity. Depends which company. Because it's really hard not to tilt your head when you go, I want to go down the hallway, right? So I think they're trying to figure out, should you just think it, or can it actually read from some of your facial muscles? Because you're playing the game, and from a science standpoint, they won't care. They go, any way that we can give you the immersive experience as a game player,
right?
I think, they'll be fine.
Well, with this brain to brain stuff, you could, I understand how you're saying you could basically hijack somebody's brain with your own brain and transfer everything you're doing, your motor functions, your knowledge of the anatomy of the brain, if you're doing brain surgery, to that person. But could we figure out a way to link them without satellites, or without like some sort of a Wi-Fi connection? I wonder.
Well, normally that's what we call like training you as a doctor and sending you somewhere to do it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So traditional education is we want to put information in your head and you can go do it in any specialty area.
Right.
So these kinds of settings, you kind of go, what are the different contexts where I can lend you, can your brain run my body, right, to do something that I couldn't do? It's sort of, that's when you have to think like science fiction for a bit. But
yes,
it's like Asimov's 3001, right? The guy plugs into the worldwide internet and links whatever he sees and hears to somebody somewhere else on the planet. Right? So they don't have to carry around a phone. So I think from the national security standpoint or intelligence community standpoint, it's less risky, right? If I don't have to carry a camera or a recording device or have anything on me that would be incriminating, if I can, once I've seen stuff and I remember it, transfer what I've seen and hear and know in some setting to then the people who need to know it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like another form of remote viewing, kind of.
Yeah. It would be a way of saying my information is secure because no one can tell right now what's in my head, but I can secretly send that to someone else. What we don't know right now, at least I'm not aware if they do, no one's published it yet, is whether or not if you and I were going to communicate in a brain-to-brain conversation, and I'm somewhere else on the planet, and somebody intercepted the communication, we don't know whether we would all use a common language or if it's like an encryption problem. Like, do we have to train with one another to understand what we're both thinking? And we don't know if then you guys had to train if it would be exactly the same or you'd have your own language.
Would it be languages or would it be pictures?
We don't know. Right now, with the Tetris experiment, people are trying to imagine the shape, or with the X's and O's, like telepathy experiment, you're just trying to imagine an X or an O. And the other person's going, I think I'm getting the impression of an O and an X, and can do better than chance.
Right.
So ideally, it would be sort of multimodal, right?
Yeah.
Because I can say, hey, I heard something. Let me think about it and let you hear what I heard. So that would be really interesting. I don't know where that I'm not aware of that having progressed from the animal experiments yet.
Right.
I know that they've done a couple of experiments with hive brain, like linking the brains of many different rodents to see if they're able to solve a problem faster than the solitary rodent itself. They are. But I'm not I know that somebody had a plan for trying it in several humans to see if you linked all their brains, would they do problem solving better? And as I sit here, I don't remember if the experiment's been done. But that would be like saying, hey, the 3 heads better than 1.
Right.
And if we link our brains when we're problem solving, would be any better. And I'm not sure. I mean, because I might be the idiot in the room, right? And prevent everybody from figuring it out.
Right. Yeah. Well, what you said about science fiction and science fiction becoming reality is interesting because the Pentagon, I think, was inviting in the 90s and the 80s, they were inviting like very successful, prolific science fiction authors to the Pentagon to talk with them about ideas for DARPA. Yeah. Like that, I think one of the writers for Terminator was there, as well as the movie Alien and a few other like really notable sci-fi, like famous sci-fi movies. So like they're spending money talking to sci-fi writers, fantasy writers. That's amazing.
It's important. I think it's important because if you go back to those personality traits, right, for people who are super high in that dimension of openness, so that fantasy, exploration, new ideas, new things, they may or not be conscientious. Like they may never translate their ideas into something that's workable because they don't have the discipline to do it. If they're high O, high C, then they usually can, right? But people who are low in O and high in conscientious, they make very good tech people. I mean, right? They're not trying to innovate. They're trying to make something work and engineer it and produce it. So I think when you think of the selection pool, if you're part of an organization that's, making a system, you tend to then get tunnel vision down a lane and not think of all the different ways something could go because you're so focused in this way. So bringing in people, I think it's really cool. You bring in people who like think in crazy different ways and go, hey, what if we could do that? Yeah. And people go, no, how could we do that? I remember one guy came when I was in government and he said, I want to know, how did Captain Kirk know when he was on the Starship Enterprise and they were isolating heartbeats on that planet, which one was Spock or something? I can't remember if it was Spock or Kirk, but they could identify who the person was by silencing all the other heartbeats and finding out, who was there. And me, I was having fun with him because he looked so serious. And I said, well, it's because it was a TV show. But we did experiment with that, looking at heartbeats through walls, things like that. And the Chinese just recently published a paper on separating out like 3 different heartbeats behind the wall. Can you scan it? And can you pick up a heartbeat signal? And if you do, can you see how many people there are, and could you identify them? So that'd be kind of cool, right? Is Elvis in the building? Is Elvis not in the building? Wow. You don't have to go in. So, but that came from a TV show idea, right? How do you do it? So I think there's a real need for that creativity and play. I think that when people play, they're really at their most inventive. Yeah, because anxiety doesn't kick in like it has to work, right? You can just, and that's why I always joke. I don't think people believe me when I'm giving a lecture and go, all of this was all designed on a bar napkin, having a great time, right? With really good friends, because those are the times when you can sit, you can have something to drink, you can talk about it, and you go, hey, I have an idea. What if? Might not be ethical, but could we do this, right? And then you go, yeah, that'd probably be unethical. We couldn't do that, but if we could, would it work, right? And then you back up and you go, what would be an ethical way of getting this done? And it gives you a freedom to play and invent and say, how would you do it? There you go.
Through wall heartbeat detection. Recent advancements in radar tech have enabled the detection of heartbeats through walls, which several studies demonstrating the feasibility and accuracy of such systems. 2025 study proposed a method using single channel continuous wave radar combined with maximal overlap discrete wavelength transform to extract heartbeats from individuals behind walls. Wow. The accuracy of 95.27%.
So that's the accuracy at like isolating the actual heartbeat.
Wow.
And the other question I was interested in is how can we use your heartbeat to identify you again, right? So, and people's heartbeats are far more unique than they imagine. The acoustics in your heart are probably different than somebody else's because of the nature of the size of your heart, your exercise, the shape of the shape of your heart, and the internal chambers. But I was actually interested in the EKG thing. Like, I was trained in medicine. We never thought that it was like personally unique unless you'd had like a heart attack and had an anomaly. We figured, well, everybody's heart goes so you're like your classic P-wave QRST complex.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that it's a little more unique than we thought. And so if you can get a clean recording, we had done one experiment where we had people wear these things. They were called life shirts, I think was the company. I think it was Vivometrics. They went out of business. But you'd wear this whole thing where a full EKG, it had your respiratory, expiratory volume and inspiration volume, so we could look at heart rate variability. And I had one group of people go in and do an experiment like just stair climbing. Mm-hmm. Then the next week, we had another group come in, but we put 10 people in from the previous group, had them all do stair climbing, just go up the flight of stairs, come back down in the building, and then just sit in the chair. And then we gave it to a team of tech guys, and we said, hey, tell us whether or not there are any people from group 2 that were in group 1. And if you can't tell us who they were, we can't tell you if there were or weren't. We just want to know, what do you think? And they didn't have a 95% accuracy at the time, but theirs was like about 85% of the time they could correctly go, this heartbeat was in this group. And I was thinking, now that would be really cool.
Yeah, no, it seems like that would be a very practical use, like to take out bad guys, right? Like instead of carpet bombing towns, you could literally like somehow figure out if you could do that with like.
Can you figure out where the signature is, right?
Right. Can you figure out where the bad guy is and take out just one person without any collateral damage? You know.
So see, that's where people would get like annoyed if they go, "Oh my God, you have a doctor talking about like using a heartbeat to target somebody." And you're like,
if you could kill one terrorist to save the lives of 1,000 people, then you're saving a lot of lives.
Right, and it's also the development of looking at applications of science. So if there are many things that are dual use, it's not my decision whether somebody does it, but I think it's being honest and saying, look, you are able to identify something, and this hands-off approach to looking at heartbeats would be really beneficial when we look at people who've been severely burned, because you can't put electrodes on them. They have like severe burns, or little neonates, little tiny babies. The electrodes are almost bigger than the baby, right? Yeah. So this standoff kind of Dr. McCoy approach, having a device that gives you the vitals and the sensor can pick up all those things you need to know from you're doing your exam. Like, that's a technology. That's something. But when you work in national security environments, people are always trained to go, how could that be used against us?
Right.
And how could it be used for us? So it's the same issue now is up, like when people talk about whether it's the Ray-Ban glasses or facial recognition, right?
Like the Meta glasses?
And they can be filming, or they look at the system of surveillance that the Chinese government's using in facial recognition. Yes. And so look, these are just technologies about how accurately it can scan your face and then pick you out from a different angle, right? Mm-hmm. It's just that the application of it is, when the government does it, is they can track people, right? And identify where they are. And I think that's where then you have a debate in whatever social community you're in. Is that something I want the government doing? Right. Do I want them doing it at home? Or am I okay if they do it somewhere else? Yeah. Right? Those are the things. Because, that's why the CIA was partly in trouble for the MK Ultra experiments, right? The idea was how to exert some degree of mind control over people. But but they forgot to tell Americans they were experimenting on them. So, and the same is true from the department.
Without their consent.
Yeah, and it was like that project with the Department of Energy where they were radiating people without telling them to see.
Oh, like doing nuclear tests?
Yeah, people would go to the hospital and, your grandparents might go in for their little visit and get radiated outside of their awareness because there was a project ultimately looking at if there was a nuclear war and there was radiation, what would be the vulnerability of the American population, right? But the main point was, no, it was the government experimenting on its citizens without telling them.
Wow.
So it's always good to be skeptical, of...
It's crazy that the Department of Energy started out as the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
They just changed their name a bunch of times.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Well, it was fun. I think was it Rick Scott who was running years ago? Back in the 2016 or something like that. He was going, I'm going to eliminate the Department of Energy. And
did he say that?
And everybody goes, too expensive. And he doesn't seem to...
The Department of Energy.
It's he doesn't seem to know what it does.
Oh my God.
So I remember then when he got in, he's like, oh yeah, we're going to keep that.
Well, I've had a lot of people on here that say that the Department of Energy are the ones that are in control of all the secret UFO stuff.
Yeah.
Like they're the ones that are testing all those Tic Tac stuffs that the pilots are seeing and all this crazy. I mean, those things. A lot of people believe that. I think what's that guy's name? Ross Coulthart just came out and he said he knows beyond a shadow of a doubt. He has hardcore evidence that those Tic Tacs that they saw on the West Coast, those fighter pilots saw, were Lockheed Martin technology.
Yeah.
So that's some deep,
cool
deep
to
stuff
find out.
if that was true. But if that's some sort of crazy anti-gravity stuff, of course the Department of Energy is going to have their hands on it because they're what was the guy? Harold Malmgren, who actually passed away recently, who was the advisor to Ford, JFK, and Nixon, I think. He was close to Richard Bissell, the guy who started Area 51, and he did this amazing documentary with my friend Jesse Michaels where he talks about the history of all of this stuff and how it's all connected to the Manhattan Project.
Yeah.
And
you think about it, it makes sense. We pay a ton of your tax dollars go to organizations that are always focused on, is there an emerging technology? How do we get a new one? How do we have an advantage? How would we use it?
Of course.
And
how
would
do we
control
use it, the world?
Right? Yeah. Whoever get it out, does it melt in the rain? Right? So it wouldn't surprise me at all if there's a ton of technology that's never been used. Right?
I hope it's
developed. Yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, hopefully they keep funding it. Right? But I think that's the interest for me. That's after working in government. That is the interesting and necessary back and forth challenging that should happen between people in an open society and having a part of your government that's secret, where you can't know.
Right.
And you're like...
In a world where it's harder and harder to keep secrets.
Correct. And I think it's okay to keep challenging the government because I think when sometimes you find they don't always do what they're telling you they're doing. And sometimes it's not making everybody safer. It might be making things worse. But yeah, I think... it'd be really fun to know. I remember when I got sworn in at the CIA and George Tenet was like, does anybody have any questions? Boom! Some kid puts up his hand right away and he goes, are there UFOs?
Really?
And he said, yes, Elvis and John F. Kennedy are all having a party out there right now. We all laughed, but I just thought it was so funny that we all just got sworn in and the very first question somebody has is, are there UFOs in Area 51? And Tenet was just laughing, and he goes, no, but whatever.
Of course he would say that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the dilemma, right? They'd always say no.
I think everybody knows. I think it's like JFK, right? I mean, do we know, does the majority, if you polled the majority of the population and asked them what they believe, was Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone? I think the majority of people who paid attention to it would say, of course not, right? And the same thing with UFOs. Like, are there UFOs flying around, stuff that's not made by humans, that's not human technology, that either is like whatever, some other species that lives here, like the same way we live here with ants, or from another solar system? Like, of course, I think most people believe that, but you're never going to get the answer from the government. They're never going to let you know, unless with what Trump's doing right now, trying to declassify everything to get everyone's attention off the Epstein files. Right. I think it's possible he might let us know that UFOs are real.
Yeah, I was just thinking they'll accidentally open a file.
He's going to come out tomorrow. I gotta come clean. Yeah, UFOs are real.
That would fit Orwell's prediction, right? You're just like, they're now at war with East Asia. Quick, do a shift, right?
Right.
So, But yeah, I wouldn't doubt that right now. It's amazing to watch it happen. I think when you look back, like historically, you go, yeah, it's just really, it's fascinating. You always wonder, what are they not telling me? What do I want to know? And people always want to know that. And you're like, I don't know if it makes difference in how many taxes I'm paying, but it'd be fun to know.
Right. Well, some people also speculate that, all that missing money that's come from the Pentagon, where like Donald Rumsfeld talked about the day before 9/11. And then it's like, now it's like 20-something trillion dollars. Some people speculate that missing money has gone to like black projects and stuff like this that you can't disclose to anybody.
It certainly would make sense. I don't know if it's true, but it would make sense, right? You'd say that's the purpose of secret stuff. It's supposed to be secret. Yeah,
And if what Harold Malmgren said is true, and the secret stuff is classified 2 levels above the Manhattan Project, the nuclear bomb, then, you would imagine, they would go to great lengths to hide receipts to things like this,
Yeah. Yeah. And then you just kind of hope, well, whoever's in charge of it is being responsible. I worked in government so long, I was like, well, I do like that adage, don't ascribe to a conspiracy what you can account for by incompetence. But it's so not everything that they can't explain is, has to be a conspiracy.
Right. The problem with that is, my problem with that is, and I've had a lot of people say that to me before, especially former CIA people.
We're paid to say it. No.
So I agree with you that out of all the things people think are conspiracies, 90% of them are incompetence. 10% of them are probably conspiracy. It might even be a lower number. It might even be 95.
Yeah.
But the problem is, people in the government or people that are in whatever that are against the conspiracies will always use that argument, even when the 5% is the conspiracy, because you have the excuse saying, look, 95 to 5, you can't even have, you can never get your 5.
Yeah. You're right. So you have to decide, can you just have fun with it?
Exactly.
I hope it's cool. I mean, I always tell her, they go, I don't know. Don't you think there are? I'm like, if there are, it'd be pretty cool to know. It'd be really cool to know what's the tech, where is it from? How does that'd be really cool.
Right. Yeah. And, it also like what we were talking about with telepathy and like using words and to do this brain to brain communication. I would imagine like pictures would make more sense, just because there have been stories of, there's lots of stories of children having encounters with quote unquote aliens, right? Yeah. Whether you want to believe it or not. And these kids, there was one big account that happened in Zimbabwe, Africa in the 90s. And they interviewed, and this guy, John Mack, this Harvard psychiatrist, went and interviewed all these children at this school in Rua, Zimbabwe. Yeah. And they all explained the same thing. They drew pictures of these things, and they explained that they were communicating to them in a weird, ambiguous way, that just technology is bad and you have to be careful with technology. And they said it wasn't words, but it was just like a feeling that was implanted into them, like a telepathic feelings being pushed into them.
It's really interesting. I don't know if you've ever read Jung's monograph on flying saucers. It's really fun. It's very thin, but he gets at that idea as why do we see these similar experiences with people in different places on the planet who don't talk to each other but have a similar conception. And you get to see his view of it was it's because of the brain's similarity around the planet. There's only certain ways we can conceive of ideas, which is, some people have made a lot about his term of the archetype, but he said, like crystal formation, there are these limited ways we form the basis of information, and that similarity is in everybody around the planet. But I thought one of his more interesting ideas was that you wouldn't be able to know the difference between it being generated in your head or outside your head, because the experience is what people have. He talks about the same thing, like when people have had their encounter with spirits or ghosts, right? And people would ask him, is it real? And his view was, yeah, they're real. It may not be what you think it is, but it doesn't make any difference, because it's your experience with it that affects how you think and how you move and what you do. But it's fun. It's a fun monograph. I thought it was really interesting. He was trying to think about at the time, how do you explain all the different sightings of similarities? And so one view is to say, well, they're real external things that appear in the sky run by a government, or that they represent real external things created by some other civilization.
Yeah.
And he said, and another explanation is a little bit different, which is they are external manifestations of something in us. And which
interesting
was a hard idea to get.
Like a projection?
Or a side effect of how we process information, a side effect of what our brains do. And that's why he used to say, look, the archetypes, we often talk about them now as if, oh, I have those, and I know what to do with them. And his view was, no, they run you. You don't run them. So that,
right.
And so you say, what's the difference between that and possession? Right? It depends on the framework a person's using in making sense of their world. If you believe, there's this external entity that controls my brain and makes me do things, that possesses me. His view is that, well, it's no different. His term for it was an archetype, but somebody else might say you're being possessed by a demon. And his view is, well, from one particular angle, it's a distinction without a difference, because it means that something autonomous from your consciously decided sort of arrangement of thinking has any say in, right? And that you're being moved and affected by something. But it's an interesting monograph to read, because it's from I can't remember if he published it in the late 50s or the early 60s, but I think it's called Flying Saucers. Yeah.
It's also like, I think it's possible that some people have more of a sixth sense than other people, for lack of a better way of describing it. Like, you know how sometimes when people are close to death, they explain being able to like talk to dead relatives. You think they're just going crazy. Yeah. Well, maybe they are. Maybe something in their brain is opening up and they can like see something or communicate with something that's actually always there. Yeah. But we just, it's our brains are crystallized and rigid, so we can't break through to that. If something like that is real, there's actually this guy Gary Nolan who's doing these studies at Stanford, I believe, and he's studying the basal ganglia of people, of humans. That he's the correlation that he's found is that when there's more neural density in the basal ganglia, somehow these people have more UFO and like paranormal experiences.
Interesting. Yeah,
and they correlate it with trauma somehow.
Yeah, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar with this, but but I do think it's fun to explore that, because it's still that fundamental way of saying, how do we understand the world around us, and even understanding ourselves. And I think I like that idea, that because Carl Sagan was kind of tipping into that in his novel Contact, right? That the experience the character has of communicating with an alien life form happens in like 4 seconds of everybody watching the ball drop, right? But it's a lot longer. And it just means he's playing with the idea that we often want to insist that because of the way we experience the world and understand physicality, that it's difficult to imagine there being something that doesn't operate that way. And so you'll either find people go, no, none of it can exist. There can't be anything else. Your consciousness is just the head on the beer. Right. And there's other people saying, well, that's one way. It's one way to view it. Yeah. But we don't know. I think from a science standpoint, the fun part is trying to say, okay, if you take the hypothesis, how would you test it? How would you do it? And some people don't want to test it because they just enjoy it. It's like saying, I'm going to figure out why the meal you served me was so good. And you go, it's not really the point of having a good dinner unless I have to make it again, right? Yeah. But from a science standpoint, you can go, well, I can tell you why you taste wine, or why you taste the meat, the receptors in your tongue. And it never adds up to what makes for a fantastic meal, or great sex. You can tell you about the physiology of it, and you go, now I get it. And you're like, well, maybe, right? So I think that there's always there's two ways people can approach experiences. One is the experience itself, and what meaning does it have for them, whether it's a psychic experience, whether it's an alien encounter or an experience. And then there's this way of looking at things from a science perspective where we're just trying to figure out how the natural world works. And so it is fairly reductionistic. It's saying, let's look at the parts, and looking at the parts, can we figure out how it works? And they're both really valuable because understanding parts and pieces, like in some of the stuff I'm doing, we figure out how something works, but it doesn't tell us whether you should value it. It doesn't tell us what it should mean. It just says, this is how it happens. Like, so for me, like this is what memory looks like. Yeah. Knowing this is how it functions as far as we can tell doesn't tell me how you value memories and which kinds of experiences are more important than another one. So people always want to push you into one box or that, especially when you do what I do. They go, like, for example, I wrote a book during the pandemic on Tarot, and I was drawing every day, and I thought, my friend Enriquez, he's a tarologist in New York, and so I was studying with him.
A tarologist, okay.
Tarot cards,
yes.
Right? So I redesigned a whole deck of 78 cards. It did all the art and everything, and that was about the same look that like my other neuroscience guys go saying, "Hey, I redesigned a whole stack of tarot." I go, "Would you?" And they're like, "Well," I said, "They're fascinating. The oldest tarot in the world are actually at the Beinecke at Yale at the Rare Book Library, and now my cards are there too. They put them in the collection."
Wow!
But it's really funny. I've done these lectures, and people, if they experience a reading, they go, "Well, how does it know that about me?" Right? When they haven't told you anything. And, it's kind of weird, isn't it?
Isn't this connected to astrology somehow?
It is in some people's minds. In my mind, I think of it related to the phenomenon that we call pareidolia. It's like where you look up in the sky and you see a man in the moon, or, a face on Mars, or you see Jesus or Mary in a tree.
Oh,
Jesus in toast. Chimpanzees do it too.
There was a bank down the street a couple of years ago that the sprinklers stained the window. It was a glass bank, all glass, and the sprinkler stained it to look like Mary Magdalene. Yeah. And a church bought it.
I remember that.
Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that from this. In New Haven, we had the Jesus tree. Like, saw Jesus in the tree. Protestants had a harder time than Catholics at seeing it. Like, I went, and I'm like, got nothing. My friends who were Catholic are like, there he is. He's right there. Wow. I'm like, I don't see it yet, right? But we do that, or like cloud watching. And when you see shapes in the clouds, it makes sense. The areas associated with the identification of those areas are lighting up in your brain. So when you see a dog, it's the same area that lights up when you see a dog, right? And COVID gave me a lot of time to talk to people on the internet around the world. And I talked to this researcher in Japan who was really interested in the relationship between rhythmic, non-rhythmic music and religious experience, and also seeing things that may or may not be there. So he was showing his students these pictures of like snow, like you'd see on the TV screen, just that static black and white dots. And he would have them look at this. He'd say, just tell me how many images you see. And in those images, there's nothing. But the average person could see 5 or 6 different things in it. And he found that he could increase the number if when they looked at them, he was playing a rhythmic music versus having asynchronous beats made by this computer. So he's looking at how we construct meaning. And I thought it was fascinating because I'm like, this is really cool. Because when you're working in intelligence and you're looking at ambiguous material, right, you're trying to create something from it. So it doesn't mean this, and patterns, right? And our brains...
What is it called? What kind of rhythmic beat? What kind of?
He had synchronous and asynchronous, sort of meaning that...
Synchronous and asynchronous.
Yeah, so one's rhythmic and then the other's out of whack, where you're getting an odd rhythm. The rhythm isn't synchronized with the other beat. Okay. So you might call it modern or something. But it's either in sync or not. And that facilitated it to see more stuff. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. I wonder what's the best environment then for an analyst to look at vague information. Yeah. Because your job as an intelligence analyst, when you don't know what you're looking for, you're trying to figure out a pattern, is you want to be creative in like making patterns. And then you have to systematically try and knock them all down to see probably if any of them might be true, right? Because we do tend to see what's on our mind, like see what we believe. It's the old adage. We don't believe what we see. We end up seeing what we actually believe. But some people have a hard time seeing patterns in vague stimuli. So his work caught my attention. So I'm like, oh, this would be really cool. I wonder if because people vary in the trait of pareidolia, sort of seeing things in clouds and seeing things in mud or seeing shapes. And I don't know if they would be better at finding patterns in ambiguous information to help us discover something we haven't discovered, or whether the tendency to, would you see too many patterns, would you overshoot it? But I was just thinking of it that way. How would you select for who would be exceptionally good at finding hidden patterns in things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting, man.
Sorry, I took my Claritin D. I was just drying out. There we go.
Yeah, especially when you're like trying to analyze mundane data, right? Or intelligence, and trying to put it all together to like make a picture, because it does make sense. Like, you see what you believe. So people are going to, their conclusions are going to be affected by their bias or whatever it is.
And that's why you should line them all up and become, when we're training as SAPM runners at the CIA as well, you're trying to train people to come up with the alternative and then knock them all down, because it's really easy to find something that makes sense to us. It's easier than we think to like make a pattern and come up with it. Yeah, there it is.
Nice.
I love the washing machine one. Yeah, the man in the mountain. Yeah, it's pareidolia. And it's really interesting. People who are higher in emotional reactivity in the personality dimension will have more of this.
Really?
But also so do artists. There's a wonderful quote, I don't know if you find it, from Leonardo da Vinci about staring at mud. And that he was staring at mud and the cracks in mud. Pretty soon he could see figures and battles. And there's a famous quote from him. I'm like, oh, that's this. And he'd like to get inspiration. And that's what I was doing for relaxation. Excuse me, during COVID, I'd make my coffee in the morning, sit in the window, and I'd scribble all over a sheet of paper, and then just turn it around and around and around and see what popped out.
Really?
And would do drawings. And yeah, there it is.
Leonardo da Vinci once suggested that one should look into the stains of walls, ashes of a fire, clouds, or mud, and see. And these can provide marvelous ideas. Interesting. I do that sometimes in my shower. I have this like crazy tile pattern in the floor, and I'll stare at the tiles and I'll see faces in the tiles.
Yeah, that's this.
Yeah.
And you can play with it, because the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then it's really kind of wild. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff.
Oh, wow. That's bizarre.
Yeah.
So people who are better at this are more open.
They're on the psychological testing, they'll score higher in openness.
Higher in openness.
Because you're entertaining a new way. If you're super low, you'll look at this, and that's what it is. You know, nope, those are the lines, right?
Oh, there's the face of the moon up there, yeah.
Yeah. The face over here, that's on Mars.
Oh, that's Mars.
Yes, that's on Mars. But yeah, people who are higher in O, they will see more of those kind of figures. But that is the fun kind of, that's the fun work, the fun kind of drawing stuff that I love.
That's fascinating. I gotta take a leak real quick.
Sure.
Quick break. We'll be right back.
So that one you just clicked to is the first one.
So there's the first one.
So that was the original scribble. It might have even been the other way around, but I turned it around and around. And
full screen it, Steve. Full screen it.
And when I had that in that configuration, something caught my eye.
Okay. So there's the first one. That's just a scribble, random scribble. Just took your pencil on the paper and just
scribbling around. And I turned it around and around, and I saw that arc, and I went, that's kind of like an arm. So then in the next one you'll see. Then I outlined it. I thought, well, if there's an arm, I guess there should be a head. So, and then it all evolved.
Oh, wow!
From there.
So she's pouring something into a cauldron.
Yeah. And see here, there's 3 streams of whatever is being poured, and one disappears eventually.
So now are you trying to make it into something, or are you still just...
At this point, I now see what I've got, and then I'm now just filling it in.
Got it.
Just tiny scribbles.
Wow.
So if he zoomed up, you'd see this is all just with an ink pen. And so those are all tiny dashes. So incredibly relaxing when you got nothing else to do during COVID. You can obsess on how to scribble stuff in. And at the end, so at this point, it's basically putting tiny little lines. And the reason why I drew all those other little lines is because then it gives me I can just fill it in. It gave me a sense of accomplishment.
That's incredible.
Filling in a row, right? So you can see the hash marks, and that's when it's almost done. And then one of the pictures is the complete thing. Probably the next one would be the completed drawing.
Wow.
But yeah, that's the wacky part and fun part is that now, because I was just at the Psychic Entertainers convention.
Psychic Entertainers Convention?
Oh yeah. It's an awesome group. So because I ever since probably late grade school, I started doing magic. In high school, I started performing, and in college, I'd been down to the Magic Castle and did stage shows. And
really,
in the last probably 15 years, I mainly done things like performing mentalism, sort of mind reading sort of shows. And but then in COVID, when I started thinking about, this would be really fun, let me try something. So I'd spent all this time designing these cards. And my partner called me and goes, hey, come on down here. I have something for you in the backyard. And I walk out in the backyard. There's this little tent set up and goes, psychic reading. So I went, what's this? He goes, well, I have signed you up for the Sunday in the park across the street to fundraise for the park. So you're going to be reading cards. I'm like, and what? He goes, yeah, you've drawn them all. You should just read cards for people. And I was thinking, this is going to go very badly. I don't know what I do. So I decided, all right, that's what I'm going to do. Person would sit down and say, have you ever had your cards read before? And they go, no. And I said, well, this is entirely for you inside your head. So while you mix the cards, just think of a question that's important to you that you don't know the answer to, but that you'd like some insight about. And don't say it out loud. Just focus intensely on that. It has to mean something to you. And when you're done, I'll lay out the cards and I'll tell you what I see. And then you can tell me what makes sense to you. Mm-hmm. And so I do this. I think it was like 400 people later, people are going, how does it know that about me? I'm like, man, it's just how it goes. Yeah. So I don't know which questions I answered. It was really meaningful. Sometimes people would hear and they go, oh God, this is like exactly what I need to hear. This really helps me see things. And I think what's happening so my magician friends are like, you didn't even ask the question. You don't know what the question is. I'm like, no. I actually found the experience is even more powerful when they never say their question out loud. They haven't written it down. It's in their head. And I said, I think this is what's happening. This frames a lens, right? This focuses your mind on something that's important to you. And then now I turn these around and read them like a narrative. And it makes meaning to you in your head that makes sense. Mm-hmm. I don't have to know what it is. And so it's been a really cool thing. I've done it like 400 or 500 people. I'm like, I'm going to do this formally and I'm going to do a paper on this. But because people really love it. And I'm always amazed. When I was in France last week, the guy who they had rented the house to have us all come, they were celebrating a big birthday party, had 15 or 20 of us in this chateau. I thought it was going to be like an Agatha Christie murder novel if nobody got along, but there's a billiard room and it was like phenomenal.
Wow.
I'm walking around and my friend Julian came up and he goes, so I've told everybody you're going to read their cards. I went, you what? He goes, yeah, no, I've already told them. They're all expecting a reading. I'm like, great. But I'm going to do it. And everybody was, I said, but here's the rule. You can't tell me your question. Yeah. Because otherwise you'll play around in your head thinking, he knows me. This is this. And I said, I think the experience is best if I don't know anything, and walk them through it. So it's a really fun phenomenon, and I think because I've been thinking about it, about what I think's going on, and I think it's rooted in that pareidolia phenomenon that's motivated now by what's on your mind that's important to you. So I think it's a way of looking at how we do things as a human, how we make meaning, and the meaning is real to people. But yeah, that was my COVID experience for doing that. So, but I have found because the classic sort of magician community, they want to know what trick you're going to do.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? And so when I was at the convention last year, not this year, I was going to do the classic thing where, you know, I have tried to figure something out about people in the audience in order to do the mind reading stuff, right?
Yeah. How does that work?
Well, this time it didn't work well at all because the person who was supposed to get me something went, yeah, I didn't get you anything. So basically, I know nothing about anybody in the audience. I thought, I'm going to treat them just like people in the park. And so I do this whole gallery reading thing to read for people in the audience. Like they have questions, they put in a bowl, I'm laying out cards, and they're going, yes. And you can see the magicians are getting really perplexed because they don't recognize the method, right?
So wait, break this down for me. So people are writing questions, putting them in a bowl.
They all drop them in a bowl.
Okay.
And you know, I don't know if you saw the movie Nightmare Alley or something, but they were showing one way of getting them all is you might swap out the bowl, right, and read all the questions ahead of time. So but none of that happened. So I get out there on stage, and I knew about 2 seconds before I stepped on stage that the person who was supposed to get me some information on people to make this entertaining had not. And I was like, they'll never invite me back. This will be interesting. And so I thought, well, no, in the park, I never had to ask anybody their question. And they all found it really quite fun. And so that's what I did. And I remember afterwards, the magicians were all, they were very complimentary, very nice. And one sat me down. He goes, I have to buy you a drink. And I said, well, why? He's like, he goes, would you share the method? Because he goes, I've seen a lot of these methods studies, but like, I can't figure out how you got information on people. And I went, it didn't.
Wow.
I said, I had to rely on the power of the way the human mind works to try and do something fun and entertaining. And he's like, wait, nobody gave you anything on any of us. And I'm like, no, not at all. I said, that all happened. That's the magic that happened in your head, right?
Oh my gosh.
So it's like taking this principle and building it and going, how can I take a principle of how your brain works and do it in a way that might be for fun? It's for entertainment, right? The way it wouldn't be for entertainment and may or may not be helpful is when you think about it like in training analysts and pushing people to like see meaning, create meaning, and now destroy it. Like now undo it, uncheck your hypothesis, figure out, give me another pattern using the same material, give me another interpretation of all that material, right? So then we can figure out what would we need to know if this interpretation was true that matched the outside world, or if it just all connects the dots, but it's not really what the enemy is doing or something like that. But it's the same phenomenon in my mind, that you're trying to make sense of ambiguous information, and because you have the drive, there's a need to make sense of something, right?
Right.
And in the entertainment lane, you're saying, hey, think of something that really means something to you. Focus on that. Lock in on that you don't know the answer to. So I never get anybody going, tell me what the lottery number is. I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
You know, but that's that phenomenon.
Oh, that's so bizarre.
Yeah.
You know, there's this other phenomena that people explain that I think might be similar to this, where like things in their lives are like things that happen to them in their life are foretold by like dreams they have. Or they're like, oh, this all came to me in a dream and then it happened in real life. I always wonder, is that real, or is that just like you connecting meaning where there's really no connection there?
Well, so even if you go with I call it serendipity, something matches, right?
Yes.
When you really think of it on the face of it, asking if it's real doesn't make any sense because it is real, right? You have this delightful experience like, oh, wow, these two things happen and it corresponds to something in my life. And you feel like you've had a revelation about it. So in that sense, it's very real. When you get into it from a science perspective, you're trying to figure out, well, which is the chicken and which is the egg, right?
Yes. Yes.
You know, is it that I remember what I dreamed because there are features that I'm now reconstructing when I have an experience? I go, this is exactly what I dreamed 2 nights ago.
Right.
Or is it that that's been on my mind and that's the way I've interpreted the experience I just went through? And that was the whole debate that people had with Jung when he used the term synchronicity.
Right.
And they were going, because he said it's an acausal principle that makes meaning.
What does that mean?
So it means there wasn't a cause. There wasn't an obvious cause that said this should be able to cause this, but somehow they're magically connected. And I go, oh, wow. This
quantum entanglement.
Yeah. So if you think of it as serendipity is a better term because it means I've had two things happen that somehow seem to be connected, and it's fun. It's serendipity isn't a negative term. You go, oh my God. You go, wow, that's so cool. I walk in, you walk in. I didn't even know you'd be here today. Or I thought I was just thinking about you the other day, and here you are, right? And you're pleased. And so if you think about it from a human experience standpoint, that connection that seems very magical. I mean, we do think in ways that are magical, is really real. It isn't real when people are trying to figure out, well, how did one thing cause the other? Like, why are they connected? That's a more interesting question, is how does our brain make this connectivity? And I think that pareidolia is part of the brain's principle underneath it. Chimpanzees do it too. They don't see human skulls, but they see chimpanzee skulls. So that guy I was telling you about in Japan, he's done some interesting experiments about whether when chimpanzees look at ambiguous material, do they see stuff too? As far as we can tell, they do.
Really?
Yeah. So the brain's wired to make patterns recognition as well. I think that's what most animals probably do it, right? That's how you adapt in the environment. You make a pattern and you go, this gives me insight on what I'm supposed to do. But I enjoy those things. That's how my goofy brain works. You know,
well,
so
that's fascinating.
I do the neuroscience stuff, and then I go, hey, that's a really cool idea in neuroscience. I wonder if you can use that if that's happening over here and try and bridge it. And kind of go, I don't know.
I mean, you're the perfect person to be working on the science aspect of the CIA.
It's fun.
A CIA psychologist should be interested in magic.
I drove them nuts, I think. My boss, my second boss there was fantastic because he was the kind of guy who he'd say, Andy, the reason I hired you is because you're good at stuff. So the only time I really need you to come to me is if there's a decision I'm supposed to make, but I guess I hired you so you can make decisions and I trust you to do it, right? So I had permission to be playful and creative and try and say, what can we do? What can we do? Yeah. So that's the kind of environment that I think that's what I love doing. Testing experiments and designing research and doing it. I think there's nothing more boring than just finding out something you already know. What's really fun for me in life is going, can we run an experiment that will teach us something we actually don't know? We actually don't know the answer to that. Wouldn't that be cool to figure it out? And so I think that's how it bridges, because I think for some people, they don't know why, you're doing stress studies and then you're doing eyewitness memory and then you're doing detecting deception and then you're doing this magic stuff. And I'm like, they're all play. They're all, in my mind, they're all forms of creatively playing with the environment you're in, trying to figure it out. Because deception's fun, right? People love it when they play poker.
Yeah.
You love it when you can hide from people what,
Well, strategic deception is fascinating, and like the history of strategic deception in the agency, and like with the development of tech and trying to hide technical innovations from the Soviet Union during the Cold War or from China or whatever. And that's like another one of these things in Andy Jacobson's book, Area 51, is when the CIA pilots were first testing the first jet planes in Nevada, they would make them bring gorilla masks in the cockpit. In case they got within visual distance of a civilian airplane, they would wear the gorilla masks. Right? So it was like...
which had to be... that would be really cool.
Just to confuse the hell out of people. So people would think they're crazy if they try to tell anybody about this jet plane they saw.
Absolutely. That's how you apply those principles, right? How do you play with human perception and understanding of something, and you can apply it to security, you can apply it to entertainment. So I think I didn't even know until I was bored one day. I think probably I'd been at the CIA at least a year, and I was bored one afternoon, so I wandered over into the old headquarters building where the library is, and they have a historic section of the library, which is the best magic collection of stuff outside of probably the Magic Castle. And I was like, this is really neat. I had no idea this here, but it gets back to that whole history of magicians being involved with government at figuring out how do you deceive the enemy. Are they fake tanks? How do you make people disappear to get them out of a building, right? If you're under surveillance. So if you think about it, like if we have to smuggle you out, how do we do it? So it's like in that book, it got declassified. It's on the market now, called CIA Manual of Trickery and Deceit. And there's a section in there that says, hey, here's how you hide people in apparently a transparent cube of water bottles, right? Or here's how you because you're trying to get people out of a building and the enemy's watching, but they go, wow, there's nothing there. We can see through all the bottles. And,
really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
So that's how do you take something that understanding how your brain works and human perception, and how do you apply that technology when it's being used right now for entertainment to something for security? So, you've seen those shows where people walk out on stage and they snap their fingers and they're in an entirely different outfit. It's probably a trick you can only do once if they're following you in some other country. But if you think about it, it's kind of like the Superman revolving door effect, right? Suddenly you're dressed totally differently. But that's what that book, the CIA Manual of Trickery and Deceit, is all about. It's which techniques were written into this to say, hey, here's how you get a poison pill in somebody's coffee. Here's how you palm off a microdot. Here's how you get information out. But it was a surprise. I didn't know the library was there, but then I knew what I was going to do when I was not working. I would go down and sit in the library and learn stuff.
Yeah. There was something else that you talked about with like DNA and storing information on DNA.
Yeah. Oh, that's wild.
Where did you get this idea? Where did this idea come from?
Well, there's a couple of different places. One is the first idea came when I'd read a paper on DNA computing. So if you have a problem that would take too long to solve at the speed of light, right? That has more than 10 to the 23rd possibilities. If you think about sort of billions of molecules in a glass and you've configured one to match some DNA thing to settle out, you can shake it all up and you can have a solution pop out. And I was like, I'd never thought about that before, that you've solved the problem working on one computer and say I can have billions of them trying to solve a problem at the same time. So it's the same concept as for quantum computing. The only thing that's sexy about it is since you've got 1s, 0s and both simultaneously, then you can solve problems much faster that would take far too long for any other system to do it, which is why it's good for encryption. And I was reading that, and I was thinking, well, DNA is a code. And so when you put a code in, if you could synthesize the code, right, the only way you could read it, because there's too many molecules, you'd have to have the key to find it, right? And so I started looking, and there was a group who had they had published a paper on DNA encryption. I think it was out of China, but then one of the groups, I think in the US, I can't remember, they actually encoded a movie sequence in DNA and then had the bacteria replicate and were able to get the DNA from that, sort of the offspring of it, and then replay the sequence for the movie. And it's of what's his name? The horse running. I don't know, you might find that online, say DNA coding of film. But if you just think about DNA as an analog to the digital representation on your pad, right? If it's a code and the interpreter knows how to get the code and then you play it, there it is. And so they would encode that. They were using CRISPR. They're able to encode that information and code it as a strand of DNA between the 4 nucleotides that you can see.
Whoa.
And so if you put the right sequence in, it's going to help you recreate whatever that code's for. And so what they were able to demonstrate is, hey, we can take this little movie clip, turn it into a code strand, put it into the DNA of the bacteria. Then when the bacteria replicates, we can retrieve the code from its offspring, so to speak, and replay the information. And I thought this was great because it's not like the AI systems that have to be super cooled.
Right.
And a guy named George Church at Harvard had I think in 1 gram of DNA, he said you can code 700,000 terabytes of information or something like that.
700,000.
I was like, terabytes? I don't know, it's a big number. But he said he has the most published book in the world because he's put it in DNA. And I was like, well, that's really cool, because if you can store information in DNA, which has been evolutionarily for at least a couple of billion years, you just think it's at room temp, you know? And so the rate limiting step to make that practical, it was like now back to science fiction on Star Trek. Remember, they had the little tubes where they could play the music because it's coded in DNA strand. Just think of it as the new digital. If you can store everything in a little tiny tube that has all this DNA in it, you just need the machine that rapidly isolates the strand you want played. So you could play your music, you could see your family photos, right? Or you could retrieve anything. So from an intelligence standpoint, since you could use DNA, then what you need is a really efficient thing for me to take a picture, have it turn it into DNA, right? Or type a message, have it turned into a DNA strand. And who would know if that was on my body anywhere? Like, you know, no one's going to find DNA is all over you. Or do you inject it into a couple of your squamous cells, like with the hypospray thing that they now use for melanoma, where you inject material into the squamous cells because they're going to slough off in 14 days. So do you get a secret message or plans or blueprints, turn them into a DNA code, inject them into your skin? No one's going to find those. And then when you get home, people can retrieve them by taking those cells, pulling out the secret blueprints. Right? So it's just it's like saying, I have this new digital camera and I can send pictures over the internet rather than the old photograph system, right? DNA is just a way nature's been passing on information, right? And so you say, well, if we co-opt that, can I send you information that's not really about anything but like this? And how do I get that information rapidly turned into a DNA code? And then when I get the DNA to you, how do you rapidly turn it back? And so I found those studies really important, because I thought, in the age now where, you know, you can track, and it's so easy to identify who people are, this would still be a really difficult way of getting
track and identify where people are.
Yeah, you know, with all the surveillance and monitoring where people go on the planet, and people tracking, you know, what you do financially. Right. And I was like, well, if you're in that kind of a world, less and less and less is invisible. And so when you think about it from a national security or intelligence standpoint, you say, as everything becomes more collected and transmitted and shared, right? Where are the arenas where you can have something completely unretrievable by other people if you want to keep something secret or securely get it to people? And so that's how I had a couple of things I was telling people about with DNA, that there's a potential way to go. Quantum computing is a different way to go to secure encryption. It just makes the number of solutions so hard for anybody to solve, right? But with a quantum computer, you can solve those problems faster. But right now, it'd be easy then to break codes that banks use or the military use, you know, with quantum computing, because it can try out all the numbers faster. It's like trying out all the numbers on the keypad and going, there's too many numbers. This will take me more than a lifetime trying out every little combination. Quantum computing or DNA computing is simply a way of doing that faster, because you're trying out all the combinations nearly simultaneously, right? In the DNA computing, the quantum computing is just more rapidly trying out all the possibilities, right? It's not limited by 1 and 0. So,
you think this is something that is like seriously being looked at and implemented?
I don't know. I suspect that it is. There's a weird thing that happened in the literature. About 6 years ago, there was a drop-off in the Chinese publications on DNA encryption. So they've been publishing, and then suddenly it vanished. And like, all the publications were quite positive. So my assumption is
they figured it out and then went dark.
They figured something else, and then why should you tell anybody else, you know, what you're doing with it would be one thing. And I never saw much published by the U.S., so I figured, if they were doing it, they just weren't sharing. But I suspect because of the stuff like with CRISPR and people modifying genes, it's a very straightforward step. And because it's relatively stable, at room temperature, there's no super high sophisticated measure you have to take keeping something super cooled or anything, So I was just like, if they're not paying attention to it, then, that's what happens with a number of things. But I'd like to think we are. I don't know. Once I left, I didn't track that. But I did notice that less has been published from the group that was publishing in China on the time. So my suspicion was, they've been doing fine.
Out of all the stuff that you've seen be proposed to CIA, or all the stuff that you've seen, even heard being discussed, what to you was like the most frightening? Or like, was there one thing to you that ever stood out that was like this could be like, when you think about dual use, like something that could be used for good and simultaneously used for bad, like this, if this gets out of hand, this could be the end of humanity or something along those lines?
From a tech standpoint, I have to think. Nothing quickly came to mind. Mm-hmm. I think in my time there at the CIA, the more salient and horrifying thing was the enhanced interrogation program, which was, it's like I couldn't think of anything really more badly thought out, poorly planned, that was significantly affecting. It had downstream ramifications on a number of things. Yeah. So I think for me, that was the scariest thing, that everybody was willing to believe like the show 24 must be more right than what we know, right?
Right.
So that was that whole mentality that they were pushing, that if you just keep hurting people more, they'll give you something. And all I could think of was like the Princess Bride. It's for science. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that was a little more alarming, people trying to do that. I think and for where I was probably the only guy who was doing human study stuff, reviewing the human studies protocols. I didn't see anything that was alarming in the frightening way. I did see stuff that was alarming in that this actually is not valid, and they want to dump a ton of money, into it. And so I thought my job at the time was to help us not do that. Mm-hmm. I think that was the more alarming thing.
Yeah.
And I think relevant to a little bit of what people are concerned about today, the kinds of things that would happen is people are always tempted not to tell Congress what they need to know, right? So there would be times when, people say, hey, we want to know what you're doing. And the knee-jerk reaction on the part of people in intelligence go, no.
Right.
And I had a good boss. He's like, no, they have a right to know. Congress gets to know if they're in the right committees on what we're doing, that we, but it was, and which was nice, because I think the knee-jerk reaction, if you're working in secret, is to always assume, well, since it's a secret, we really shouldn't let anybody know.
Right. Well, the thing about secrecy is that if you have a cloak of invisibility, does that enable good behavior or bad behavior?
Right. And most of the time, it's usually a temptation to run to bad behavior when you think you're anonymous, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that was one of our, because we met as a group of psychs around the interrogation stuff, and we're like, the more secret you make that, and the fewer people you have constantly monitoring or observing something, the more likely it is that people who get frustrated resort to something unhelpful or cruel, because it's frustration. And usually the more people that there are in a room watching you do something, the more aware you are of what you're doing, and the more you think, I'm not sure this might be a good idea, right? So when you read about some of the deaths that occurred, and and the water enemas, and you just start reading the Senate's report on, and you're just like, it reads a lot like the Inquisition, where people are being cooked, and at what temperature will you confess, and things like that.
Yeah.
And you read it and you think, they were really doing this to people, and it just sort of boggles your mind, right? And I think that it's easier to get into a mindset where you can justify everything when you don't have onlookers, when you don't have people watching what you're doing. So I would hope that, but you never know what administrations learn. I would hope that people have learned, at least from some of the stuff that's come out now of Guantanamo Bay, the decisions judges have made, is that, if you don't think it through, you miss out on the opportunity to bring people to justice, right? Like, I think about that. When I was down there, the people who were there were the prosecutors, the victims' families, and the defense. And so there's a gallery at the back of the courtroom where those are the family members of people who died in 9/11.
Right.
And they're hoping to get a trial, right? And what they've been consistently going down now, almost 20 years, right? And there's been no trial of anybody, which is really, I think, terrible. I think we captured people, we've held them, and we used to criticize Russia for sending people to Siberia, right? And going, well, they don't need one. It's my own belief. I don't think the government wants a trial. I don't think they want to have to lay out what they didn't find or what they found, because in a trial, you got to do that. You got to lay out your evidence and say, what are we going to charge a person with? I think it's just been stalling and stalling and stalling, which I think is, for me, it looks shameful to say 20 years later, 22 years later, you haven't brought anybody to trial after this huge event that's changed so much in our society, our access to public spaces, and what you do at the airport, and all this the massive amount of money we spend on security. And you're like, we've spent a lot of money and we've paid for this. Yeah. So why have we have no one convicted?
Yeah.
So that's for me, that's my biggest disappointment about it. And part of it that's contributed to that has been the torture program. So I think that's what I think it was really destructive and to me really disappointing, because I think there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I want bad people apprehended and I want them to pay for it, right? And we have a system. And I would like to see that happen and say everybody gets a trial.
Right.
And when you say, hey, that's what the government's supposed to do. It's supposed to lay it out and go, we think that's what you did. They got to prove it.
Yeah.
So that's why I pick on I pick on the enhanced torture programs. I think it was so destructive in a number of ways. Yeah. I think it destroyed a lot of confidence within the psych community, that people felt it would be good or ethical to consult the government. There were big movements in both APAs while this was going on saying this is completely evil for any doctor to be involved in, right? Yeah. Where I do think there is a role for having doctors consult to the government when people consult to interrogation. Because I think, like in our work with the police, like I say, their mindset is the person's not talking to me, they must be hiding something, right? And they might be. And sometimes you discover they've got schizophrenia, or they're ill, and that's what's going on. And maybe it's both. And then you figure out how to deal with it. But I was never exposed to any situation, I think, where like I saw tech that went like, oh my God, we should never do this. But I've read about people who publish sort of the structures of viruses, and you go, I just can't imagine this will be a good idea. But,
the gain of function stuff. That stuff's terrifying. Yeah. Trying to find viruses and make them more deadly. Yeah. No matter what their excuse is. Like if it's to make viruses more deadly to kill more people in the context of war, or like if they make the excuse like, oh no, we have to figure out how to solve these viruses in case they do ever get out. Like either way, you're creating a super deadly situation where if you don't have the right security measures or prevention measures of the shit leaking out, you could cause like real problems in the world, which is what we saw.
I mean, think about it. It's a really, I'll phrase it this way. It's a really interesting question why we haven't had bio-suicide bombers.
Bio-suicide
bombers. We have the suicide bomber with the explosive vest, right?
Yeah.
We haven't had a wave of people who said, infect me with pneumonic plague, or bird flu, and put me on an airplane and fly me through airports across the country or the world, right? Just to infect a bunch of people, and then I end up dying a horrible death from whatever it is. We haven't had that. And I think it's fascinating. My own interpretation is I think there's an ooh factor to like dying of a bad bug, and there's no glory because there's no big boom, right? There's no great terrorist video you make of the guy vomiting blood and finally dying, right? But when you think about it as a means of terrorizing people or killing people, the suicide bomber approach has been pretty effective at getting concessions out of different governments, right? But people get scared. They go, there's going to be suicide bombers. But we haven't had any that have used themselves as the carriers of a bioweapon. And I maybe that's what's to come. But I've been fascinated by that. Because once you look at, I don't know if you remember when we had the big bird flu scare, was it 2008 or 9 or something? And the projections were published on how many airports for a person who is actively coughing out this stuff that you could inhale, how many airports, what the multiplication factor, it was like logarithmic about how many people could get infected really, really, really fast. And I was just saying, when you go through airport screening, we don't have any tests that, unless you just look so sick, everybody goes, I don't want to be near the guy.
Right.
But there's a phase before you get there where no one would know that you breathing in the room was, killing people.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was fascinating. Like we don't have anything that tests for active infection of something now in real time going through the security line, right? And I used to talk about that to my boss and go, I think this is really interesting. Like theoretically, it's an option. And if you go, yes, our goal is this.
And it seems like it would not be difficult.
Right. As far as we can tell, people can do this in labs in the basement. Right? Yeah. They can grow all kinds of bad bugs. So I think, it's weird. And I don't know if it's a function of what the purpose of political sort of terrorism is. It isn't to wipe out the country you're targeting, it's to get a shift in government, right? And bioweapons are hard to put back in the bag.
Who was that guy who got he got extradited? Did he get extradited? There was a nanobiologist at Harvard, maybe, Charles Lieber, who got in trouble for working with Chinese spies. I think he was giving information on his nanobiology lab at Harvard to Chinese kids, basically, like they were supposed to be foreign exchange students or something, and they ended up being Chinese spies. And this guy,
our joke is they all are,
right?
They during COVID they passed a law that every citizen had to help and work with the intelligence community. So
this is him. Yeah. Okay. Charles Lieber, a prominent nanobiologist, Harvard professor, was arrested on January 28, 2020 for allegedly making false statements to the U.S. federal authorities regarding his financial research ties to China. At the time of his arrest, he was serving as the chief of Harvard's Department of Chemistry and Chemical Biology and in the field of nanotechnology. And then what happened to him? He just got hired by China, right? He reportedly received $1.5 million from Chinese government and Wuhan University of Technology to set up a research lab in China, in addition to his monthly stipend of $50,000.
So there's what he did wrong, right? He never disclosed it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where you go wrong.
Right. Imagine
that much money. You gotta.
And he just moved to China, and he got hired full time in China to do the stuff there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that'd be lucrative, and I mean the Chinese wouldn't view it as spying anyway, right? They would do like, you should do it for us. That's what we'd like.
Of course.
And I remember we had a project we did with the Brits back in 2010 or 12 where we were doing the memory study, and we were working out of the Hilton Metropole in London. And we were looking at detecting deception in these different cultural groups. And one group were Chinese who were studying in London. And we thought, because at the time we were doing that, some Chinese American had been arrested by the government as well. It might have been the Greg Chung case, where he had been accused of spying for the Chinese. But we remember bringing it up and just asking what their opinion was. And nearly every participant would say, oh, that's not spying to take business proprietary information and go home with it. That's your duty. I mean,
wow.
that's you're supposed to go bring things home and help your country. And I thought the reason why that was important in a study of detecting deception is it means that they wouldn't feel guilt about it, right? And part of the testing that lots of investigators use to see if you're lying assumes that you feel guilty about it, that you feel you're threatened by that, like this is something you shouldn't have done.
Right.
But I'm like, well, this is the morally right thing to do from their point of view. You're supposed to go do that.
Right.
It's like, so not telling you about it is the morally appropriate lie. Like, no, I've got nothing to be. Right. So I said, this is an interesting wrinkle in doing deception, because in some of the models, we assume that people should feel either ashamed about it or frightened about it or alarmed about it or guilty about it in some ways. So that's why we were interviewing them. We wanted to know what their opinion was. And I remember when we got together and we were debriefing the team, we said, has anyone said that like they shouldn't do it? And we're like, no, they all say it's the honorable thing to do. I'm like, that's good to know. You need to know. So,
wow.
But yeah, the Chinese government's been very interested in it. And I think in the future, they're funding science. That's the alarming thing to me.
Yeah.
Right now, if we look at like current stuff that's going on in defunding science, you have people who want their career in science. So you've got France going, come on over. You've got Denmark going, we'll hire people. Canada's four or two professors from Yale just moved to the University of Toronto. But the Chinese are all over that. I think I probably get 2 emails a month asking me to come speak in China and talk about like neuroscience research. Oh yeah, they're all very gracious, and I type the same thing every time. I'm so flattered. Thank you for asking. I'm swamped. I'm swamped.
Wow.
But yeah, they're very active in their state funding of science. They want to play catch up. I don't know if you remember, like 20 years ago, they said, we want our own space station in 20 years.
China?
Yeah. And they were only off. I think they were only off by 2 years. I think COVID slowed them down, but they have their own space station, and so they're systematically saying, hey, we want to play catch up and we want to be like you guys. So we want our own space station, but they're on the moon, right? So I think that my own view is I think people need to rethink that. Yeah, there it is. We need to rethink that, that private business will save all of our science stuff because it's government funding like that takes the long-term view to say, what does it take to get there? You're not going to see a profit for 25 years or something.
Yeah.
Or ever.
Well, they play the long game and everything, right?
Yeah, they do. And I think, I think that's something that's worth remembering. Like in the current debates people have about like, why are we spending money? What are we doing? But that's the part that alarms me the most when I think about it from a security standpoint. I think there's a bunch of stuff I don't know anymore because I'm out of the community. But I do know that giant government science programs tend to win over time. Because
I would imagine
they're just channeling money and going, that's what we're going to do. And I'm like, yeah, we still haven't gotten anybody in that giant SpaceX rocket yet.
Right.
We've seen all kinds of those scheduled
how many times have we pushed back the moon missions, the Artemis? They keep pushing that back every year. I think every president since what, Bush 1, after we went to the moon, has been saying, we're going to get to the moon this year. Every single president's campaigned on that.
It's really fun if you haven't seen it. The report from Congress that came out on the Chinese and Russian and a satellite sort of situation. Yeah, I think it was published. I think it came out last year. Yeah, it wasn't this year. It was last year when we heard all the people from Congress go, oh my God, there's this like satellite threat. It's really interesting to see where they're positioning satellites that are slightly out of our reach and why they want them on the moon, why they want a base on the moon.
Who specifically?
The Chinese. Okay. They've actually drawn up plans with Russia for a lunar base, and the plans are in the report. And my joke with my students was, I said, so now you can see why we enjoy the fact that Russia's tied up in a war, because they don't have any funds to go do this. Well, they're tied up in a war. but the long-term plan is to have dominance over what's in orbit. Because they had developed their satellites to go ahead and blow up other satellites, but and they put the plans in the report from the U.S. government and what they want there and what they want to do. And
how did we get this report? How did we get these plans from them?
I'd have to go back and look at the reference list, but the Chinese haven't been secretive about it.
Oh, no?
No, they're saying this is our plan. This is what we're going to do. They've just been very open about it, which I think was alarming when people, they're working. But the principle is that the further you get away from what's in orbit, the more control you have over whatever the U.S. has in orbit. Right, because then you can destroy satellites.
From the moon.
Yeah.
Or from outer orbit.
Yeah, or from outer orbit. Yeah. It's all strategic advantage.
237,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's a long way. and they're going, man, we're going to do it. And I think they will. I was like, hey, everything else they've said, that's what we're going to do.
Wow.
They've been doing it. So I think right now for scientists growing up, if you're going, hey, I want to be a rocket scientist, this is what I want to go do. Mm-hmm. You're like, here, you may or may not get hired by SpaceX, but you have other countries now vying for it and going, hey, come to China, come to the park, do AI, do space. It's
crazy stuff, man.
It's going to be crazy. Yeah.
Well, listen, man, thank you so much for coming here and doing this. This has been a fascinating conversation.
It's a pleasure. I don't envy anyone who's editing it.
There's no editing. We're just going straight up. We're doing it live.
Cool.
Tell people where they can get in touch with you, find out more about what you're doing and all that stuff.
My email is charles.a.morgan@yale.edu. So they're free to email me anytime, and I love responding. I get all kinds of emails all the time from people going, hey, can you tell me more about this or direct me to some studies? And I'm like, sure. So,
fantastic,
but I promise to respond.
That's very gracious.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah.
I really
made me think about some things in a new way. Actually, I love it. Every time I do this, I think about new things. So
cool, man. We'll do it again in the future.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.